Good afternoon. I'll call the July Board of Regents meeting to order, and I will start by asking the clerk to read the roll.
Regent President Peterson.
Here.
Vice President Grebe.
Here.
Regent Atwell.
Here.
Regent Bechtel.
Here.
Regent Delgado.
Here.
Regent Hall. Regent Jones.
Here.
Regent Klein.
Here.
Regent Levzo.
Here.
Regent Menny-Deeds.
Here.
Regent Mueller.
Here.
Regent Peterson.
Here.
Regent Plant.
Here.
Regent Stanford Taylor.
Here.
Regent Tiedemann.
Here.
Regent Walsh.
Here.
Regent Whitburn.
Here.
Regent Woodmansee.
Here.
Thank you. Before we consider any items on today's agenda, are there any members of the board who wish to declare a conflict of interest? Hearing none, let's get on with it. Before we get started, it's my pleasure to introduce two new colleagues to the board. First, Becky Lebzow was just elected president of the Wisconsin Technical College yesterday. Congratulations, which also makes her a member of this board. She previously served as vice president of the Tech College system. I've worked with Becky in the past. She will be an outstanding addition to this board. Becky is an owner and an operator, along with her husband and her son, of a 180-cow, sixth-generation dairy farm near Rio in south central Wisconsin. She's also employed at Meriter Hospital in Madison as an ultrasound and nuclear medicine technician. She's a graduate of both the UW Hospital and Clinic's radiologic technology and diagnostic sonography programs. It's a mouthful. Welcome, Becky.
Yes.
We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Yesterday, yes, I was elected chairman of the Technical College Systems Board, an honor I am very pleased to bestow. Our farm has been in the family quite a number of years. We have a dairy farm, and we're pretty proud of that. I also serve on our local school board, the Partyville School Board, now on the Technical College and now here. So I guess education is a high priority to my life, and I really enjoy the opportunities that it involves for all of us. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. It's also my pleasure to welcome back Regent Edward Manny-Deeds. This is Ed's second tour of duty on the board. He was first appointed and confirmed in 2010, and he fulfilled a 7-year term. Ed's an attorney with Ritchie, Gundinger, and Manny-Deeds in Eau Claire. A member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, he's a graduate of UW Superior with a law degree from UW Madison. Ed has been a good colleague and a great friend, and fully dedicated to the UW system mission. We're thrilled to have the opportunity to welcome you back, so let's just do that. Regent Manny-Deeds, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the governor for the appointment. I'd like to thank my wife for agreeing that I could do this. I'd like to thank my orthopedic surgeon, Nathan Stewart from Eau Claire, for fixing my knees. I'd like to thank all of you for the warm welcome you extended to me. I really appreciate that. In answer to the question that's been asked many times since this appointment, no, I'm not crazy. So I look forward to working with all of you on the issues, and I was really, truly enriched the first 7 years I did this, and I see friends and old people that have been on the Board of Regents for a long time and new people, and I really look forward to collaborating with you, working with you, and getting busy to help the citizens and the system and the students and the parents and everyone else involved in this whole operation. So look forward to it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Ed. Well, welcome to our new colleagues. I know I speak for all of the members of the board when I say we can't wait to work with you more. And with that, I'll turn it over to President Croix, who has several introductions to make.
Thank you, Regent President Peterson. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Dwight Watson, the new Chancellor of the UW Whitewater campus. And Dwight, would you please just stand up and welcome. Dwight joins us from Southwest Minnesota State University, where he has served as Provost and Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs. In this role, Chancellor Watson focused on advancing student achievement by removing barriers to success. He also helped to build collaborative relationships with two-year community and technical colleges, and advanced in an innovative, inclusive, and diversity agenda. So previously, you'll find some of this interesting, Dr. Watson served as chair of the Education Department at Hamline University in St. Paul. He also is not new to the UW system because he served as an Associate Dean of Teacher Education at the Eau Claire campus from 2007 to 2010. He subsequently served as Dean of the College of Education at the University of Northern Iowa. His scholarship is focused on literacy and language acquisition of students of color and urban learners. His teaching experience includes PK-12 classroom experience as well. He holds an educational doctorate in education, of course, curriculum and instruction from North Carolina State University. He earned his Master of Education degree, bachelor's degree in education, and Associate of Arts degree in liberal arts from the University of South Carolina. Sorry about those Gamecocks, by the way. So would you join me in welcoming aboard Chancellor Watson? Would you like to say a few words?
Board members, it's an honor to be here, humbled and honored to be the 17th Chancellor of University of Wisconsin-Whitewater in their 151st year. What a tremendous honor. I always feel like in order to launch the future, you must understand the past. And so I'm spending a lot of time trying to understand the context in which I will be working in. And my introductory mantra to myself is to listen, learn, and lead. And I'm going to ask you all to help me do that. Thank you.
Thank you. So, like me, as you can see, Dwight has a very professional hairdresser. So, thank you, Dwight. Dwight will join us officially on August 1st, so thanks for joining us a little early. Please join me in also welcoming Michael Alexander, UW Green Bay's new Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Michael, would you stand, please? Dr. Alexander joins us at Green Bay from the University of Northern Colorado, where he was director of the School of Music. He also has served as an interim director of the School of Music at Kennesaw State University in Georgia. He's a Grand Island, New York native. He's also not a stranger to the UW system, as he earned his master's degree at UW-Milwaukee and his doctorate at UW-Madison. He began his new role on July 1st, so welcome back to the UW system. We're looking forward to working with you, Michael. I'm also pleased to welcome Maria Stalzer-Wyatt Kuzo, who will serve as interim provost and vice chancellor for academic affairs at UW Superior. Maria, would you stand, please? There she is. Okay. Dr. Kuzo is currently a professor of legal studies and coordinator of the school's legal studies and criminal justice program. Dr. Kuzo has served at UW Superior for 25 years as a senior faculty member and campus leader, and has an extensive network of engaged community partners. She also stepped into the new role on July the 1st. So we appreciate you doing that, Maria, and we look forward to working with you as well. It's back to you, President.
Thank you. A warm welcome to all of our new colleagues. We look forward to working with you in the future. The central theme of this month's meeting is innovation and the key role the UW system, its people, and its institutions play in moving the state forward. To get us started, President Croix would like to say a few words.
Innovation is our All in Wisconsin theme for this month's meeting. So I want to share a few thoughts about innovation. Innovation is a concept that most agree is critical to moving society forward, and yet few seem to agree on exactly what that means. Search the web for a definition of innovation, and you'll get thousands of different results. For our purposes, innovation encompasses applying ideas that are novel and useful, or turning ideas into solutions. It's also important to remember that the ideas generated on our campuses may take years to translate into an application. But we are getting ever faster at doing so thanks to increasing interdisciplinary collaborations, increasing multi-campus initiatives, and ever-expanding public-private partnerships. Fostering the innovative people, ideas, and resources of the UW system is key to empowering entrepreneurs and business owners. These private partners need our students, our faculty, and research to develop new opportunities that are essential to keeping Wisconsin's economy vibrant. As you will hear later this afternoon, the UW system has 13 small business development centers located all around the state. These SBDCs are part of UW system's Institute for Business and Entrepreneurship, IBE as we call it, and the SBDCs, acronyms are starting to sound like the military, leverage their expertise and market savvy to help launch and grow innovative business enterprises. Since 2014, these SBDCs have helped start more than 1,200 businesses and supported capital investments of nearly $400 million. Earlier today at the Education Committee, we heard UW Madison's request for their College of Engineering to offer a Master's of Science in Design plus Innovation. Innovative thinking to meet the needs of our students and the state is also what drives new program offerings like the ones you heard about in that committee. To better prepare students to meet the expectations of employers both now and in the future, we are advancing new programs in high-demand fields from biomedical engineering to strategic management. Excuse me. Innovative thinking, the kind we foster here within the system, is also helping to address some of society's most pressing concerns. The point is, innovation takes many different forms. What's important is that innovation and a willingness to foster, promote, and support innovative thinking is crucial to having a vibrant future and a healthy economy. And it's all in Wisconsin. President Peterson.
Thank you, President Cross. At this time, we'll turn to agenda item number 5. We'll turn our attention to the 2019-2020 annual operating budget for the fiscal year that began July 1st. There are many moving parts to this budget that we need to and should fully understand and discuss. And Vice President for Finance, Sean Nelson, is here to lead us in that discussion. First, I'll turn it back to President Cross to set the stage.
Thank you. As in each budget, we must ensure we use every dollar wisely and in ways that serve our students, our faculty, and our campuses. I would like to highlight some of the main takeaways of the proposed 2020 annual budget. I will be very brief so the board can dive into this in greater detail with Sean Nelson. First, the amount and format of state GPR funding will be defined by a plan approved by you, the board, and then presented to Joint Finance. We have not had to use this process before, so we will keep you apprised as this process moves forward. Second, resident undergraduate tuition is frozen for the 7th consecutive year for our 4-year institutions, and this is an important distinction, and for the 11th year of the last 13 for our 2-year campuses. Preserving the quality of a UW education as tuition remains frozen will require operational investments by the state and our federal partners. Pursuing additional operational investments will continue to be a priority for the UW system. Third, the typical cost of attendance for an in-state student living on our campuses will increase by 0.9% in this budget at our 4-year campuses and 0.8% at our 2-year campuses. Let me repeat that. 0.9% increase at our 4-year campuses and 0.8% at our 2-year campuses. As we look more closely at the annual budget, I ask that you keep these 3 main points in mind. Here to lead this discussion is Vice President Sean Nelson. Sean will highlight these points and major additional components of the budget proposal, and then, of course, we will entertain your questions and comments. Sean?
Good afternoon. So why don't we just start walking through. I want to highlight some of the points that President Croix just talked about. First of all, our estimated revenues for FY20, we're looking at about $6.326 billion. Our expenses slightly north of that at $6.382 billion. We'll close the gap with the use of program balances. As President Cross mentioned, resident undergrad tuition frozen for the 7th consecutive year. Again, 11 out of the last 14 years for the 2-year campuses. Seg fees and room and board increases are limited. We'll get into a little bit more detail as we walk through the presentation on a campus-by-campus basis. And further, the average cost of attendance, again, up less than 1%. That's 0.9% for FY20. I can tell you last year it was 1%. So over the 2-year period, a 2% increase for the average cost of attendance. Additional state investment for pay plan, we'll discuss a little bit further, and some of the other campus funding priorities. In terms of revenue sources, pretty clear. Our state support general purpose revenue at about $1.16 billion, or 18.3%. Tuition at about a quarter of our budget, $1.52 billion. And then on the auxiliary side, of course, those student operations, the operations that serve students, so the housing, dining, and parking, and so forth. GPR and tuition largely supports our instructional effort on campus. Moving over to the general operations side, so these are the self-supporting operations on campus, the camps, the clinics, the conferences, the copy centers, the Babcock Dairy, at about 5.3% of our overall budget. Federal indirect reimbursements, so the administrative costs that we draw down for serving those federal grants on the campuses, 90% of this activity is at the Madison campus. Gifts, grants, contracts, obviously a big part of our budget at about $1.2 billion. And finally, federal financial aid, $1.14 billion. I should mention this is largely pass-through funding that supports financial aid for students. I do want to talk about personnel a little bit. So obviously a large part of our budget is devoted to salaries and fringe. When you look at the all funds budget, it's about 53%. When you dig down a little bit deeper and look at GPR tuition, it is about 76% of our overall budget. In terms of faculty positions, we're up about 1.5%, or about 95 FTEs budgeted, to approximately 6,200 FTEs across the system. On the academic and university staff side, we're down slightly about 1%, or about 275 FTEs, bringing us to about 26,800 FTEs. I did want to highlight the fund sources for all of these positions. You should not be alarmed by that negative 850 number. These are largely vacant positions that were eliminated in the budget. This is not a loss of actual individuals for the most part. However, some of the restructuring is factored into that total amount. So you can see across revenue sources how that's applied. Key funding increase, again, so in the signed budget, we do have a 2+2 pay plan over the biennium. I know the Board of Regents, and as you all know, we asked for full funding of pay plans. So traditionally what has happened is pay plan has been 70% supported by the state and 30% through tuition, or the campus share. So without an increase in tuition, campuses need to bear that additional cost. So when you look at the 2+2 of the biennium, we have about 40.3 allocated through state resources to support those 2% increases. And then finally, the 16.3 would be the campus share. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And in terms of the implementation dates, for FY20 it would be January 1st, 2020, and for FY21 it would be January 1st, 2021. The other key funding increase is the $22.5 million for this year in FY20 for the UW campuses. It is $45 million currently over the biennium. Still a lot to be determined right now. It is currently being held in Joint Finance Committee's supplemental appropriation. So we still need to develop a plan and get JFC approval. And then finally, I think it's important to note that we will develop a spending plan and have approval
before the Board of Regents before submitting that to JFC. So still very early in the process here, a lot more to be understood over the next few months or so. Additional state funding, similarly, the Dairy Innovation Hub also needs Joint Finance Committee approval for the release of funding. Currently, it's $1 million in year one in FY20 and an additional 7.8 in year two for a total of 8.8 of the biennium. This will benefit Platteville, River Falls, and Madison. We did receive $3.7 million in what is called cost to continue funding. So the standard budget adjustments year over year for fringe costs, for lease payments, and I think about $700,000 or $800,000 for additional debt service. And then finally, on the Wisconsin grant. So this is the state's primary needs-based financial aid program. It was level funded at about $62 million for the UW system. The board had sought about additional $7 to $8 million over the biennium, and this is where we landed for FY20. In terms of tuition, again, so the 7th consecutive year of resident undergraduate tuition freeze, the 2nd year of the biennium being year 8. We do have a net revenue increase of about $23 million attributable to market-driven professional school and non-res increases. This is more than just Madison. I think we had 4 campuses come before the board in the fall with some increases in the professional schools, and we had some non-res rates as well. And I want to bring this chart back out again because we love to talk about balances, and I love to talk about balances. It's very important to me. And I think this is very key to have this conversation here today. And I know that the tuition freeze has been an issue of interest to the board, but I think it's very important for us to understand sort of where we started when this balance issue came up back in FY13 to sort of where we currently will land once we close the books on FY19. You can see that we're down, nearly $300 million over that time period. And certainly the tuition freeze has certainly accelerated the spend down of those balances. However, there's more to say here. You don't need to understand this chart. My kids love this chart, but it's very hard to communicate this one. What I want to show here is that we have about $257 some odd million in estimated tuition balances. It's a very different case across our campuses. All right, so you look in the 0-3%, we have 1 campus in that bucket and 1 campus in the 4 to 6%. And when I talk about percent, I'm talking about balances as a percent of the total operating budget for that campus, okay? And we have 4 in the 7 to 9%, and then we have 7 campuses that are plus 10%. This is important because it tells a very different story, and I want to share one key fact with you. Madison is 24% of the total tuition balances we have, yet they are in the 4 to 6% bucket. They're in the red. They're the 1 campus there. So that tells you something, right? So we really need to understand this. And I want to say on the 0 to 3%, that is Stevens Point. We have been working very closely with Stevens Point to develop a financial recovery plan. In fact, they have a 3-year recovery plan that's been reviewed with President Croix and system folks that starts in FY20. And we know that they have a plan and a transition to get to a better, more solvent and viable budget in 3 years. So I wanted to highlight that. Further, I wanted to show this chart. Since the tuition freeze, we're looking at academic year 13-14 through academic year 18-19. I want to show you our regional peers. Now, these are the flagship campuses across the Midwest here. And I should mention that when you look at CPI or inflation over that period, it's just shy of 8%. And there we are. There's where we stack up. You see it ranges from 3.4%, and then you have Michigan at 18.3%. I did a little back-of-the-envelope math on Michigan. So they had 16,000 in-state students. I think tuition went up about $1,800. It's about a $30 million revenue increase on in-state alone. And when you look at out-of-state, they actually went up over 20% and generated an additional $100 million through out-of-state residents. So all in have really added to their bottom line through some, what I would argue, some modest increases over time. On the auxiliary side, so as part of your budget pack, you have all of the schedules for the campuses for seg fees, housing, and dining. We'll talk a little bit about that. Overall, on the seg fee side, we had an increase of about 2.7%. Room and board rates will go up about 1.4%. I want to highlight this chart because I think it's very important. Over the last 3 years, we've been very conscious about what campuses can present to system for a proposed rate increase. They are limited to coming to us with pay plan and associated fringe benefits. So the unique thing about the auxiliary side is campuses have to pay for the full value of those salary and fringe costs, right? It's a little different than if that position is supported through state support. Any documented contractual increases, so if there's a dining contract or if it's tied to CPI, that needs to be documented to system as well. Of course, debt service and enumerated capital projects are key. Any proposed student-initiated programming is a big part of this as well. And then finally, on the student safety side. How that breaks out, so when you look at that criteria, obviously a big share of that is on the debt service and the facility side. Pay plan or mandated compensation is also another big chunk. That would include municipal services, some additional operating costs needed for new facilities. And then finally, as I mentioned, the contractual agreements. It's a similar story on the room and board side. Most of that tied to debt service and facilities. Contractual, again, I mentioned the dining contracts for one. And then finally, in the mandated compensation, so those salary costs and fringe to accommodate for pay plan. This is the chart we really want to highlight. So when you take it all in, you look at all of those auxiliary rates, you look at the seg fees, you look at the room rates and the meal plan, and of course, tuition not changing year over year. This is a great story, I think. We're less than 1% the average cost of attendance for an in-state student at the UW. This is impressive. And I think, again, I want to mention last year it was 1%. So over 2 years, a 2% increase in the average cost of attendance to go to the UW. Finally, I want to get back to balances again because you know I love this topic. So this is important. So we talk about unrestricted program revenue balances over time. So this is just our tuition, GPR, auxiliary, general program operations, and our federal indirect. We are down about $308 million, projected to be down about $308 million when we close the books on FY19, or about 32%. And one thing I want to highlight, so I want to drill down a little bit more, and my 6-year-old daughter loves this because she thinks it looks like a donut. It does look like a donut. It wouldn't be a tasty donut, but so I just want to talk about this slide a little bit. So this is a closer look at our auxiliary balances by commitment. So we talk about this as unrestricted program revenue balances, but when you look at the detail, these are hardly unrestricted. These are very real capital commitments that the campuses have across the system. So I want to highlight, I'm not going to go through these different projects. In fact, it's just a partial list of the projects. And sort of that darker blue bucket, the 21%, those are the major projects that are ongoing across our system. The 5% is the all agency that we administer at system. We have a couple of examples there. A lot of these are for utilities or deferred maintenance type projects. For example, the steam infrastructure at La Crosse, or the fiber optic telecom upgrade at River Falls. And then on the 3% is sort of the small projects, which we allow campuses to sort of accumulate some balances to do these projects on their own in consultation with the system partners. And then finally, I just want to highlight, so the 39% for debt service. Right, so we have these buildings across our system, yet we need to have a prudent set aside, right, for debt service, for those future obligations. And we have a huge amount, I forget the number, over $100 million bucketed for future debt service obligations to support the capital construction on our campuses. I think finally, I have 32% there for sort of non-capital, undesignated, and this is one I'd sort of like to drill into going forward. These are for the non-capital stuff, other auxiliaries that we probably need to get better visibility in, and I want to thank Regent Mueller for really hammering me on this one. We really need to understand what's in there and how those are applied across our system. So the other additional fund sources I want to mention, we have projected expenditure increases for our general program operations of about $40 million. I will tell you this is largely the extension moving over to Madison and having that transfer now reflected in the Madison budget. This isn't an actual increase per se of $40 million, but I do want to highlight it because that's what our documents illustrate. The federal indirect cost side, just a slight uptick there of a little over 2%, about $3.7 million. And finally, on projected expenditure decreases, gifts, grants, contracts, down about 86 million, about 6.7%. And federal financial aid, again, largely driven by enrollment, about negative 4% or 46 million decline. On the restructuring, I think it's important to mention the restructuring before moving on. So FY20 does start phase 2 of the restructuring. We now have the full budget integration of the former UW colleges into the receiving institutions. That was an 18-month endeavor to really crosswalk the former resources from the colleges to the receiving institutions. In fact, we're still working on it currently. And I think as the board knows, President Croix committed to holding the 7 receiving institutions harmless for the structural deficit they inherited through the end of this current fiscal year, through the end of FY20. However, additional conversations are underway. In fact, we have a retreat with the receiving institutions tomorrow with the chancellors, CBOs, and provosts to talk about how we extend that hold harmless period through FY21. And this is a major commitment from President Croix and system to assist those 2-year campuses become viable institutions going forward. Before turning to questions, last year I did this and I forgot to thank my team. I didn't want to do that, so I put the slide in between the questions because I really want to acknowledge folks that have worked very hard in putting together this document. First, the chancellors, the chief business officers, budget directors, controllers, and all those folks who lead those auxiliary units. And then finally, my budget team, Renee Stevenson, leads a good shop over there. Thank you, Renee. She's sitting over there. Amy Arnold as well, thank you. Julie Gordon and Gary Bueller, Jen Goitowski, Chrissy Klappa, Mickey Kroll, Jane Frankowitz, and Shelley Miller. The last 2 really spending a lot of time on our Plan UW, our budget planning and forecasting system, which has been going pretty well. So with that, I think I can take any questions from the board.
Thank you, Sean. Before we pivot to questions on Vice President Nelson's report and presentation, may I have a motion to move forward Resolution 5?
So moved. Second.
And a second. Thank you. Now I'll accept questions. First, Regent Whipper.
Would you go back to your overall reserve balance 752 slide?
Yes.
Several years ago, at the assistance of the legislature, we approved methodology with them targeting going forward what they would view as appropriate balances. The target was 12%.
Yep.
Our motion here is to approve a budget of $6,328,000. Unless my math is wrong, 752 is 12%.
Good math.
Is that?
That's accurate, yeah. And you're referring to Region Policy 21-6 on the program methodology for determining balances.
Which is the marching order that
Yep.
we have had from the legislature. Second question to you and President Cross on this $22 million currently locked up at Joint Finance. We're here now in day 10 of fiscal 20. You indicated, Sean did, and you did in your opening comments, that you would bring a distribution plan to the board. We're going to see that soon. Don't we need to nudge that along because we're already into the fiscal year?
We had been told originally that Joint Finance probably wouldn't come back until September. So we felt, well, okay, we have some time to work on how to put that plan together and get it in front of the board. But we heard yesterday directly from some legislative leaders that they may be coming back much quicker. So, and I believe you confirmed that as well, Regent Whitburn. So we will be working on something to put in front of this board, and we will be asking the board for some form of a special meeting between now and probably much quicker than we originally anticipated. Put something in front of the board. What will the request be to the Joint Finance Committee?
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Regent Bechtel.
Thank you, Sean, for the presentation. We're going to have a presentation later on behavioral health. Can you just remind us where those dollars come from?
I want to defer to the campuses on that. I mean, we did have some seg fee increase to support mental health services, I think from at least 3 campuses, if I'm right. And we also had several last year. That's on the seg fee side. So I will defer to campuses on terms of using GPR to support those services.
So it's kind of a combination of
Yeah,
seg
it's a
fee and
combination
general?
across the system.
So looking at slide 15, currently, would behavioral health fit under one of those enumerated areas by which a request, a rate change could be asked for?
Student initiated, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Regent Atwell.
Thank you. A comment and a question. In my conversation with other regents, with Regent President Peterson and Ray Cross and yourself, Sean, the subject of tuition freeze has come up kind of on a reoccurring basis, and I think I understand the political dynamics in the legislature. It sort of takes a brave legislator to vote for, to lift the freeze or to change the process. So I guess my observation is I think it's incumbent upon us as regents to use the process that we have to try to have a more informed discussion about this publicly, about what it means, what it doesn't mean, the background of how we got here. Regent Whitburn's point that if the goal was to get the reserves down to 12%, we seem to have achieved that. So I want us, and I've said this to Regent President Peterson, to engage in some kind of process where we focus more clearly on that. I think you've done a good job of bringing that information to bear, but it's an essential discussion. It's something that I just think it's critical that we help the legislature arrive at a different conclusion in the next biennium. So with that, I want to ask a question, which I honestly don't know the answer to. So we have one campus that is in that 0 to 3% reserve. I understand what happens when a household goes below 0%. What happens if one of our campuses goes negative? What are the mechanics of that? How does that play out?
So I did mention it. So we have been working with the Stevens Point campus on a
To
fiscal.
prevent it?
Yeah, we're proactive certainly on that front. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
But what does it mean to have a negative reserve balance? Do we just keep spending, or do we have
Well,
emergency
they have to.
funds?
They introduced a recovery plan that include reducing expenses, achieving savings through attrition, right, and other, right. That it's over 3 years. I think we felt comfortable where they landed ultimately.
So,
And
yeah.
I will say on the auxiliary balance side, they're actually doing okay. So this is just on tuition balances on the auxiliary side. They're fine.
So a direct answer to your question is that the system helps them overcome that or bridges that, but there must be a plan in place to deal with this, to right that ship.
So we'll cover the overdrafts until the problem's fixed? Is that?
Overdrafts being a bank language, I'm assuming, so given your position, I suspect that's why you're thinking of it that way, but we don't view it that way, so.
But it does feel like a business unit that needs attention, that you need to correct as part of the holding company to get it back to stability. And I think that process has been underway and continues. But I think your points are very, very salient and well taken. Regent Klein.
Thank you, Regent President Peterson, and I just want to pile on with what has been said here before by my colleagues, Regent Whitburn and Regent Atwell. I really do think it's time to take this issue up and to do it in a concerted and, forceful way with a plan behind it, and really determine among ourselves what we think the policy should be and restore, hopefully persuade the legislature to restore the power to set tuition with this board. It is statutorily our duty and responsibility, and I think it's time to make the case responsibly that we do that.
Regent Mueller.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Sean, I have 50 questions. Just kidding. I have three. I've narrowed it down to three. Could you go back and show the slide, please, where you talked about the 70-30 split in
Yeah.
funding?
There we go.
There, thank you. This is just so important, and I think it's still not well understood by some in the legislature. I went back to look at some of the definitions in the statute that I know so well. And general purpose revenue are monies collected from the state taxpayers, and they can be used for any purpose. So they're highly in demand. When we receive general purpose revenue, we spend every penny of it, in my view, as we should. But then program revenue, what we call here in shorthand the campus share, is funds credited to finance an agency or a program. There's certain funds credited to finance an agency or a program. The easiest way, I think, to explain this is for the regulatory agencies of the state. They regulate banking or credit unions. Those entities are assessed a fee. The positions are funded fully. But we have this, really, over time, this rather unusual arrangement, I believe, of 70-30. I think it's a gentle person's agreement. Is it in statute as well?
No, it's not. You're exactly right. It's just been a historical practice.
Right.
Yeah.
And so every time those funds that should be credited to us that we expect to get from tuition in order to pay our campus share of salaries were hurt. And we understand it at one level, but I just wanted to drill down again to explain why it's a big deal in fully funding our staff.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you.
That's more of an observation. I have a question about general program operations, which interestingly are the fastest growing of our expenditure categories. It's a 13.6% lift. And I've heard you and others say forever that it's business-type enterprises such as Babcock ice cream, and I have had my share of Babcock ice cream. But this is $344 million in this general program operations category. So I hope that in future meetings we can drill down into that a bit to better understand that fast-growing area and make sure that the funds are being, to make sure that we understand how the funds are being spent.
Yeah, good point. I do want to remind you as well, part of this is the fact that UW Extension went to Madison, and there were some budget adjustments being made. So they transitioned the GPOs over to the Madison campus.
So that explains part of that.
That explains most of it, yeah.
Thank you. My third and final question relates to the important category of financial aid. I noticed in one of the mustard-colored table that we aren't spending every penny of federal financial aid. Why is that?
I think that's largely a reflection of enrollment. So federal financial aid is not reducing per student. We just have fewer students. And so the funding is currently a pass-through through our budget. We're not leaving any money on the table. That may be different for the Wisconsin grant, however, but not for federal financial aid. It's largely tied to enrollment.
It's just that our revenue estimate was higher than our estimated spend. And with federal financial aid in such demand,
Yeah, I mean, they're budgeted estimates, so in the end, right, we have fewer students, and then it becomes it's hard to sort of get that granular initially when we develop the budget.
so that money that's budgeted for us in Wisconsin will lapse back to the federal government.
That's right.
Thank you.
Sean, is that a result of poor revenue budgeting, or is that a result of an anticipated decline in enrollment?
I think it's a little bit of both, Ray. I think the great thing about Plan UW is helping campuses budget revenue, if you will, and we are considering that as revenue. You see a lot of that reflected in the budget document before you. So I think over the next couple of years, we'll see a little bit more precise measurements of where folks are going to land in terms of budgeted revenue versus expense. But federal financial aid is one. This is very atypical. I know in most states, federal financial aid is not part of the system budget. It's simply funding that flows directly to the student. So it's very unusual here in Wisconsin how we capture that.
Sean, could you go back to the donut? Go to the previous one, please.
The previous slide?
Yeah, I'll tie them together. Is the red section is, if you look here, we show 4 funds: tuition, GPR, auxiliary, GPO, which is general operating, which is what Jan was just talking about, and then federal indirect program. If you look at the size of the red bar, in some cases, it's been growing while the tuition portion of this has been shrinking, as you can see. And so the auxiliary piece of our fund balances has been the most troublesome for us because it's been growing. So now go to the next slide. So when we look at the auxiliary balances, what Regent Mueller and Sean and all of us are trying to do is get a better understanding of that 32% up there, because that means that 68% of that budget, of those auxiliary budgets, are for physical property kinds of repair and replacement. So we need better understand what this means. Now, I have trouble with the way the state looks at these as unrestricted dollars. That's how they're classified. And if you go to that previous slide, I think it's 106 million or something, 106 billion at the top. It's all classified as unrestricted money. And yet in the next picture, you can see we're committing those monies to physical projects, but the accounting process doesn't show them as restricted. So the only real unrestricted money in the Auxiliary Fund is about 30% of that 285 million. And that 39% is the area that has been growing because campuses are setting aside funds for future debt obligations. And that's killing us right now. That's the piece that's hurting us, in addition to not understanding specifically what's in the 32%. But it's really that 39. And I asked Sean, well, can you just pull some pieces out of that so we can better understand what we're holding money for, a future obligation? And that's really difficult to do. So I just wanted to go through the auxiliary fund a little bit to show you what we're trying to deal with. We need a better understanding of what is in those funds, where they are, how they're obligated, how they're planned, how they're designated. Those are categories established by LAB. That's what we're trying to do, and Sean and his team are working on that. I wanted to just talk a little bit about that. Is a problem area for us on the fund balances.
Regent Whitman.
That said, President Cross, at the end of the day, isn't not true that most of these dollars in most of these buckets are in fact fungible?
That's why they're called unrestricted. So the point you're making is, could, in the case of the gymnasium natatorium at Madison, a part of the 21%, could Chancellor Blank actually shift that money? Yes, she could. That's why they do that.
Other questions from the Board of Regents? Well, just a comment, for the last several years, certainly for as long as I've been on the board, we have struggled with accountability and transparency. And I would say, while we're not all of the way there, we have overcome tremendous adversity to get to where we are today. We have such a better accountability focus on where we're spending our dollars. We have such a better foundation of how we manage our operations. So to the slide that Sean put in earlier about your entire team and the team on campuses, that is a testament to our hard work that puts us where we are today. I mean, this is, in many respects, a debriefing of what's been entitled to us from the legislature. And let us not forget that from a capital perspective, we did very, very well and are dealing with a number of deferred maintenance issues that have plagued us for an awfully long period of time. And to Regent Atwell and others' points, we need to continue to have the dialogue on the importance of reinvestment in the UW system so that we're not diluting our quality. I had the opportunity to receive my daughter's first semester tuition bill yesterday. Regrettably, she is not going to a UW system campus. The amount of fees associated with that at a private institution looks a little bit like how phone bills used to look. I'm familiar with that. That troubles me. We've corrected that over time. But understand, for all of that, and it is a laughing matter, for all of that, the value and the quality of what we put on the slide ahead, which is what is the total cost of attendance, is really remarkable, and that's what we can't lose sight of. And that's the case that I believe we have to make from now and going forward until the next biennium and beyond. And so I certainly appreciate the introduction of that continued conversation, but I would challenge this board and everybody in this room. We have to make that case, and we have to make that case in a way that it's a decision for the legislature and citizens of this state to decide, do you want to adjust it by way of a tuition freeze removal, or do you want to adjust it by way of reinvestment through GPR dollars, as we talked about? At the start of my remarks to introduce this topic, I asked that everybody make sure they had their questions answered. Have we done that? With that, we've got a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Sean, to your team. Well done. The next item on our agenda is building a collaborative ecosystem, Wisconsin's powerful and growing small business development center network. President Croix, please lead us off.
Thank you, Region President Peterson. As I noted earlier, the Institute of Business and Entrepreneurship and its 13 small business development centers are at the heart of the UW system's intersection with the state's local business community. Our SBDCs have talented consultants and specialized course offerings dedicated to help small businesses launch and succeed. Since 2014, they have served more than 17,000 clients. Their work with these clients generates millions of dollars in economic impact, making a difference for our families, our communities, and our taxpayers. This is really the Wisconsin idea in action. So at this time, I am pleased to introduce Mark Lang, the Executive Director of the Institute for Business and Entrepreneurship. Mark.
Thank you, Ray. Good afternoon, regents and chancellors, and university staff, guests. I'm pleased to introduce the Institute for Business and Entrepreneurship for this session, and the theme of innovation, if we kind of go back before that budget discussion and raise comments on innovation. It's a perfect opportunity for us to see, for you to see and hear the stories that we're about to share with you. Now, all of us at IBE consider our work directly connected to the Wisconsin idea. And the fundamental mission of the Institute is to enhance Wisconsin one business at a time. And to that end, our work engages new and existing businesses in every county across the state. Now, our statewide business outreach is made possible through 5 specific units at the Institute. And while we're here today to talk about the Small Business Development Center Network, I think it's important for me to take just a little bit of time and tell you about the other units that are in the Institute. First, the Sbdc, the Wisconsin Sbdc as it's commonly known, provides one-on-one business consulting and other services with the financial and advisory support of the Federal Small Business Development, or the Small Business Administration. The Center for Technology Commercialization offers hands-on assistance to early-stage technology and innovation-based entrepreneurs to assess the feasibility of their ideas and to access critical funding sources. This may sound familiar to those of you who heard Idella Yamban this morning talk a little bit in the READY Committee about her work with the Idea Advance Seed Fund. The Food Finance Institute leverages and supports a collective network of professionals focused on building and funding profitable businesses in the food, beverage, and value-added agriculture sector. The Center for Business Intelligence is a really specialized unit providing data, research, and decision-making tools to owners of what we call second-stage companies and to economic developers in Wisconsin. And finally, the Business Dynamics Research Consortium manages and creates proprietary data that we own and develop that is used to stimulate research on business performance and its impact on state, regional, and local economies. So with these 5 units, while these 5 units all have unique activities and their own expertise, it's the collaborative nature in which they work that provides the type of combined and specialized services that really businesses need today. I can tell you that working across federal funding, state support, multiple grants, UW system campuses, local economic developers, that all comes in with a high degree of complexity. But what makes it work so well for us is our people. That's why I'm so pleased that you'll be spending some time with Bon Wickenheiser, and that Bon is B-O-N for Bonita, this afternoon, who's going to moderate the panel that you're going to hear from. The energy, compassion, and expertise that she brings to her work with the Institute is a key factor in our success. Bon is the Associate Director of the Institute. She oversees the Center for Technology Commercialization, and she is the State Director of the Wisconsin Small Business Development Center Network. So with that, Bon, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mark. President Cross, Chairman Peterson, and the Board of Regents, thank you for inviting us here today. We appreciate the chance to tell you about the work we do and to introduce you to some of the people who make that work a success. We did include some time at the end of the presentation for some questions. We can all recall being in the right place at the right time, learning of and acting on wise piece of advice, and most often trying something, having to try something again, and something else, and then trying once more. Access to the right information at the right times has shaped all of our lives. We're empowered when we use our skills, trust our mentors' advice, and draw on our experiences when we want to achieve personal success. When we innovate, we keep going, we improve what we do, and also who we are. Entrepreneurs do the same thing. They try new ideas and seek better ways to serve customers and communities. The phrase, "Access empowers innovation," truly embodies the university's outreach mission. Access is more than being at the right place at the right time. Business people need trusted advisors that support them. Those of you who have had businesses know. Access to mentors allows people to explore their ideas openly, discuss their problems confidentially, and with people who don't have competing agendas. The Institute is part of the system and provides access through advisors, through partnerships. These partners shape the services that are relevant, respond to the entrepreneur's needs, don't compete with the private sector, and fulfill the university's mission. Partners that commit time and money make sure that the services are valuable to their constituents and that they have a return on investment. Federal, state, and local agencies, local economic development groups, and businesses currently invest in the Institute's program. These partnerships make up 2/3 of our budget. The Sbdc has been working with aspiring entrepreneurs, new and established businesses since 1979. We use tried and true protocols to deliver quality services and measured results. The Sbdcs are primarily located on UW Comprehensive and Research campuses. The program funds campus-based experts in accounting, law, finance, manufacturing, retail, tech, human resources, and more. The centers are active members of their entrepreneurial scene. They know and refer clients to those specialized experts in other programs around the state. Access matters to real people. Metrics help illustrate the program's reach and results. as President Cross has pointed out. 26% of those 17,000 clients live in rural Wisconsin. Nearly half are women. 1/3 are minority clients, and over 1,000 veterans used SBDC services in the past 5 years. Entrepreneurs across the state participated in over 1,100 training events and received over 85,000 hours of confidential one-on-one consulting. These numbers indicate that Wisconsinites from all walks of life find the services valuable and use them extensively. SBA advocacy research reports that roughly half of Wisconsin's workforce is employed by the state's small businesses. Just as campuses prepare the state's workforce, the Institute supports the businesses that hire them. SBDC client businesses support nearly 67,000 jobs. These clients are vital to their local economies and provide jobs in factories, on Main Street, in local healthcare practices and tech firms, businesses that are the backbone of their communities. In the past 5 years, over 600 manufacturing firms used the SBDC. More than retail trade is about 14% of the client base. More than 550 professional, technical, and scientific businesses sought SBDC consulting. These jobs matter, whether the company is new and just getting its legs, or just 30 years old and is looking to transition. Tomorrow's new businesses are vital to innovative economies and healthy communities. About half of the clients at the SBDCs are planning new ventures. They use training to vet their ideas' feasibility, and they use consulting to firm up their plans. 380 of these 1,200 plus new businesses are located in rural Wisconsin. A business idea is just an idea without a good plan and the money to make it happen. Clients acquired over $400 billion for their new businesses with the help of the SBDCs. Along with the local lenders and economic developers, SBDC consultants prepared clients to access the right capital at the right time with debt structures that worked for them. Rural companies received 39% of this investment, over $158 million across the state. We take these metrics seriously, and so do our stakeholders. Clients personally verify all of these metrics, and they do so in writing. Empowering business people with access to information, mentors, and capital matter. The SBDC would not be nearly as effective without the strong support of the UW campuses around the state. Campus leadership sets direction and fosters these partnerships that best serve their individual missions, and which often include entrepreneurship and economic development. UW system campuses, through their SBDCs, empower entrepreneurs in a variety of ways in response to local needs and using their individual campus-specific strengths. It's my pleasure to introduce representatives from UW River Falls, Whitewater, and Oshkosh. These campuses and community leaders can best explain how this cooperation works and how real people benefit from their efforts. UW River Falls Chancellor Dean Van Galen identified innovation and partnerships as one of his 3 strategic goals. Campus involvement in the region's entrepreneurship effort has resulted in a strong, committed community investment. Danielle Campeau directs the SBDC at UW River Falls and the St. Croix Valley Business Innovation Center. Danielle is a creative, energetic, and inspiring colleague. She's a real catalyst in making Chancellor Van Galen's visions a reality. Dale Jorgensen is a dedicated, well-respected regional leader from River Falls and a Navy veteran. He's an early believer in partnering with others to grow the region. He's an accomplished business owner, youth advocate, and lifelong champion of numerous community organizations. And I'd like you to hear from them. Danielle, the center opened in 2018 after years of planning. Tell us what it is, how it came together, and why.
Yeah, thank you, Bon. And I'll take a step back. My official title is the Director of the Center for Innovation and Business Development, which is part of the College in Business and Economics at UW River Falls. And it took me a year to say that without stumbling, so yes. But the center was created about 5 years ago, really with the goal of supporting innovation and supporting business development in our growing economy. So in River Falls, we're located in St. Croix County, which is projected to be the fastest growing county in the state of Wisconsin, with an expected population increase of 41% through 2040. So the opportunities that we have ahead of us are phenomenal. And I would point out that we're really fortunate in our area that we have really strong economic development partners, including Dale here. And we really have a dynamite team of people that want to work together to move the economy forward. That's not something you always see in economic development, but we're really fortunate to have that. And I would say the biggest highlight of that partnership has been the St. Croix Valley Business Innovation Center. I know some of you have been able to visit the facility, and I hope more of you are able to as you make your way to River Falls as well. But this facility was really a culmination of about 8 years worth of work, focused on bringing a business incubator to the region that would foster entrepreneurship and support innovation. It's about a $4 million project, funded in part by a federal Economic Development Administration grant and in part by a WEDC grant and local financing. And I would want to say that one of the highlights of this facility and part of its success is the co-location of the Sbdc, which is located right in the facility. Not only that, but I would also say the codependence of the Sbdc services that we write into the policy that our tenants are required to meet with our Sbdc consultants on a regular basis in order to move their business forward. We just released our annual report, and we opened last April, and I'm really happy to report that in 2018, our tenants created 36 jobs, retained 24 jobs, and received private investment of $6.35 million. That's pretty phenomenal for the first year for an incubator, and I think a testament to the innovation and the growth potential that we've seen in our region. So one quick example of the innovative companies that we have, our second tenant was created as a joint venture with an $8 billion Japanese chemicals company called Nagase, and our first tenant, they are working in innovations in the 3D printing industry. And the first tenant and founder is actually a UW River Falls alum as well. So that's created a win-win-win situation. And they're doing some really great things in the area. So as I mentioned, this partnership was really a fantastic opportunity to create some real growth potential for the innovative businesses in our area. And I would just like to end that the Institute for Business and Entrepreneurship has been pivotal in the success that we've seen so far in providing the resources that these businesses need to help grow and to make it to the next stage. And I'm thrilled to be an employee and enjoy working with these small businesses every day. Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. Dale, as a longtime leader in business and economic development, what do you value in this particular partnership?
Well, I also want to back up a little bit just to let everyone know that 20 years ago I embarked on a path to an entrepreneur's dream. I started my own business in River Falls called Riverland Laser. In part, my success can be traced back to a meeting with Steve DeWald with the Sbdc located on the campus of UWRF. He worked with me to finalize my business plan and continued to check in on me as my business grew. We had a partnership. In our economic development community in River Falls, it's all about partnerships. UWRF is a respected and very visible institution that lends immediate credibility to our efforts. Through the College of Business and Economics, the Center for Innovation and Business Development, and the Small Business Development Center, there is a robust effort to help businesses succeed, and I'm happy to be part of that. The Innovation Center is more than a building. It's a beacon for our community's economic development efforts that speaks to our shared and sustainable prosperity. We get things done because we get along.
Thank you, Dan. UW-Whitewater recently established its Community Engagement Center as the central hub for residents to access the university's outreach program. Kevin Kaufman leads the UW-Whitewater Sbdc and Wisconsin Innovation Service Center. He has deep experience in banking, manufacturing, and business strategy. He understands what businesses need and has a great sense of timing, both for program enhancements and a good story. Kevin, tell us about WISC and how it helps companies innovate.
Great, thank you. So for companies looking to launch or companies looking to grow, the gold standard of entrepreneurial process is the lean startup method, developed and promoted by Steve Blank and Eric Rees. Once a product and market fit is hypothesized, feedback from the potential target markets is needed to verify that value proposition and the positioning of the market offering, leading to either a go, a no-go, or a pivot decision tree. Wisconsin Innovation Service Center really serves a vital role using student labor with professional management to assist companies with new products, new markets, and new services in cost-effectively getting actionable information directly to make more informed decisions. It really follows our precept of fail fast, fail cheap, learn a lot. So on the slide there, you'll see a picture of an invention called functional hand. It was invented to compensate for underdeveloped small motor skills. You can put a paintbrush, a pen, a fork, things like that. The inventors contracted with us to gauge the size of this market for small and special needs children. In the course of our research, we made the decision to also include adult special needs and senior market. The response from the senior market, particularly at the assisted living and nursing home administration level, was outstanding, with directors basically begging us, where can we buy this and would you take a check today? Additionally, product enhancements making it food safe were recommended and implemented to that. For the cost of just a few $1,000s and the enhancement of our students working on that research project, they were able to come to market with a bit of a pivot and basically a nice target market identified, they're off and running.
One of the most important issues in today's world is cybersecurity. We heard about it at the Ready Committee too this morning. UW-Whitewater and UW Extended Campus with participating universities are addressing cyber workforce education needs. But there's a real and growing cyber threat facing small businesses. Tell us about what UW-Whitewater is doing to address that.
Well, my question to our esteemed panel here is, who here is familiar with the Fazio mechanical data breach? Does that name ring a bell? Fazio Mechanical is a commercial HVAC contractor out of Sharpsburg, Pennsylvania. They had credentials to log into their customer systems to monitor performance and energy usage. One of their clients was Target. Ring a bell now? Because Fazio's system was infected and because Target did not have their IT system segregated properly, 40 million credit cards numbers were stolen. The cost to Target is estimated over $300 million in hard costs for credit monitoring and replacing the cards. Lost sales and their reputation damage easily double that number. Supply chain is going to continue to be more and more critical. Small and large businesses are running those risks today. So the landscape today in small business cybersecurity is very similar to 1995 when small businesses were introduced to the internet. We're not sure how to use it, we're not sure exactly what it is, we're not sure exactly even what the nomenclature or the language we need to use. Today, 49% of businesses have done, quote unquote, something about cybersecurity. 3 years ago, that number was only 6%. The need for education and basic knowledge around the risks and terminology is great, and we've developed the Cybersecurity Center for Small Business, which is solidly aimed at assisting with this problem. By developing and promulgating a risk assessment tool, very easy to take, and basic small bite educational modules, again, utilizing student labor from within UW-Whitewater, we're becoming more, business can begin the process of identifying their risks, protecting their data, and becoming more deliberate about integrating physical and data security into their operating framework. The working hypothesis is that a risk algorithm, which would work like a personal credit score, will become a shorthand for risk assessment to the business's financial, supplier, and customer partners. Eventually, we expect to see a certification process similar to manufacturing quality systems, which will qualify entities as low risk for data breach and external IT system infection.
Thanks, Kevin. That particular initiative is getting national attention through the National Association for Small Business Development Centers to actually roll out those assessments across the country. UW-Oshkosh's Chancellor, Andrew Levitt, had a goal to drive economic development and entrepreneurship through mutually beneficial relationships. These outreach efforts are attracting significant state and local support. Colleen Merrill directs the UW-Oshkosh Sbdc. She knows a great opportunity when she sees it, and she knows how to get the right players into the room to make it happen. Two examples of that innovation are the Alta Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation and the statewide Global Trade Initiative that she leads. Colleen, tell us what you do at the Sbdc and how the Alta Center works.
Thank you. So we connect, leverage, and empower. We are strengthening the entrepreneurial ecosystem on campus, in the region, and in the state. We serve as a powerful resource to help transform innovative ideas into reality, and we help companies see the future of their industry so they can innovate and stay relevant. Something is happening in Northeast Wisconsin. The entrepreneurial ecosystem is growing, and the Sbdc and the Alta Resources CEI at UW-Oshkosh is right in the middle of it all. So last year, our Sbdc Center saw a record number of 200 clients. This year, we are on track to double that number with over 200 clients logged already. We are seeing students, faculty, entrepreneurs with ideas, and those already in business. About 70% of our clients are those that have already launched a company. We help them validate through lean business development. We help them get back on track, expand their market. We do lots of financial forecasting for capital expansion. We connect with resources, the student interns, the faculty expertise, other organizations around the state, research to help guide their decision-making, and funding resources and packages. Now let me explain a little bit about our two centers. The Sbdc is housed in the College of Business, so we have students and faculty that are stopping in all the time. The Alta Resources CEI is housed within the Sbdc space. We launched that in 2013 because so many students were following me around asking for more resources. And we provide specific consulting and connections that are specific to the student entrepreneurs. We are completely run by donation and grants that we write every year. We literally see hundreds of students through our CEI. We see them through our bi-weekly or bi-monthly speaker series, through our pitch contest, our business model contest, our spring and summer accelerator programs, and our ideation challenges. By leveraging our donations, I am able to write a grant every year to WEDC for a seed accelerator, which then transfers funds to these students to launch their businesses. In fact, in the last 5 years, we've launched over 45 student companies, with 70% still active. We have generated millions in revenue and in follow-up investment. Our process is the same, whether you're an Sbdc client or coming through Alta Resources. We assess our clients at their current position and help them lay out a roadmap that connects them to the right resources, leverages our relationships to support their needs, and empowers our entrepreneurs to move forward.
Thanks, Colleen. Your effort focusing on international trade is really important, not only to the northeastern part of the state, but also the rest of Wisconsin's businesses. It is the market of the future. What are you doing and how do the companies benefit?
So I would say that both pre-venture and established businesses need to think on a global scale. With 95% of our purchasing power outside the U.S., international trade is becoming relevant and definitely more complicated. Just think tariffs in the last couple months. About 3 years ago, the Global New North Committee came together to bring a new technical support person to the region. They didn't have the funding. Sbdc came to the table by carving out resources to support 50% of that position. We then collaborated with New North, New Rep, WMEP, GoEDC, and UW-Oshkosh so they could contribute the other 50% for a 2 to 3 year position. This collaboration resulted in a new Sbdc International Trade Consultant. That collaboration helped us receive a 3-year grant from WEDC, a tip grant of $650,000. Now that grant now has us working with 5 different entities across the state to provide additional consulting in international trade. We now work with the Water Council, UW Parkside, New North, Chippewa County, and M7. Because of these collaborations and these agreements, 72 of those 200 clients that we have seen this year are now focused on international trade. We have brought to campus trade reps from Africa, Germany, Australia, Mexico to help coordinate export expansion into these countries. We help sort out tariffs, duty drawbacks, educate our businesses on how to save money in foreign trade zones, and so much more with the movement of goods. Our global marketplace is changing daily. Technical support and increasing access to resources is key to helping our companies compete, grow, and innovate. Our goal is to find a way to continue to fund this position so our companies have a partner that helps them navigate the challenging world of international trade.
Thanks. The Sbdc consultants are the only members of the university system staff that are actually nationally certified by NASBITE. And those in Oshkosh are part of that effort. You have some really interesting collaborations that work for your clients. Tell us about those examples.
So I'll give you a couple examples. One partnership we have is with WISIS. I have a lot of students that want to start a business but don't have an idea. So we partnered with WISIS on a collaboration to commercialize intellectual property that they hold. We hired a team of entrepreneurial students. We took them through the process of lean business development. They researched and analyzed 5 different intellectual properties held by WISIS. They chose 2 this past semester to work on, and they just launched a new company this summer to commercialize one of those products. Really cool initiative. The other thing we're hearing is from our large companies. Just want to give you a quote that one of the Fortune 500 companies in our region had just said to me. Our company is stagnant. We need the entrepreneurial mindset of your students to help us disrupt our industry. So how did we answer? We started with half-day ideation sessions. Those sessions brought together students and business leaders to brainstorm solutions. That grew into a 24-hour innovation challenge open to any student on campus. This past April, we received a $5,000 donation to run our challenge. We brought together students from nursing, education, kinesiology, arts, biology, every 13, 15 different disciplines. They all came together. They gave up a Friday night and all-day Saturday. And this was during Mifflin Days in Madison. So this was really a big deal, right? So they came together, and what they did is they worked together to provide innovative solutions on the problems the company presented. We now have a prototype from that 24-hour challenge. We have had some of our students attend board meetings to change their perspective. When a stagnant business needs a jumpstart, they're turning to the Sbdc to help them connect with students. By colliding our students with business leaders, we are helping create new ideas, and I believe we are influencing people's lives far beyond the boundaries of the classroom.
Thanks, Colleen. Yep, Dr. Levitt, you're right. Colleen is a force of nature. We've shared some numbers and strategies, but the best part is we'd like to introduce you to some of the people the Sbdc has helped to start, expand, and invest in their businesses. Christina Pence-Deneau leads a transit manufacturing company and needed help with her 60-person business to expand and finance that expansion. She first met the Sbdc in 2011 and has worked with the program throughout the past 8 years. Here's an excerpt from a USA Today story that recounts her journey.
Five words that would summarize being a small business owner: stress, pride, fear, grateful, success. Hometown Trolley is located 90 miles north of Green Bay. It's in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, literally in the middle of nowhere. We manufacture trolley buses that are reminiscent of the turn of the century. It is a really happy, colorful product. It's like Santa's workshop almost. You know, we're building a fun toy in the respects that it's not like the average white bus. It's a colorful trolley. We incorporate all of the modern technologies that you would find in any city bus. So it really is a vintage trolley by look, but underneath it is a full modern transit vehicle.
The whole concept of a manufacturing business is hard in general. She's the only woman-owned transit vehicle manufacturer in the country. And for her to be able to do that as a single mother raising her children was very impressive to me.
I divorced at age 28 with a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old in the middle of nowhere, and having to make a business that was really small and undeveloped. I had to make sure that I survived every day to support my children. I gambled and put everything on the line, got an SBA loan, and borrowed money from whoever I could, including my mother, and believed that we had a really good product and it would pay off. Our sales doubled and then doubled and then doubled again. And then this year we are already locked in for 25 million. So to go from a 2 million to a 25 million company in just like 5 years, I never thought that we would ever be at the volume that we're at.
Since the video was produced, Hometown Manufacturing has added buses to its product line, developed and sold transit vehicles using green energy, and has expanded to over 100 employees in Crandon. Along with buying her leading competitor, Hometown Manufacturing now exports to Canada and South America and has deals pending in South Korea, Australia, the Netherlands, and Dubai. As you can see, this works personal. And she had a little bit more advice to give.
My advice to small business owners, innovation, innovation, innovation. You have to stay current in the market. I don't think it takes like a genius. It just takes someone that's really passionate about what they want to do. If you believe in yourself and you're strong, you can stand on your own. I think that that's the biggest lesson I've learned is probably believing in myself, laying it out in front of me in stages, and then making sure it gets executed. And then you look back, without even really thinking, how did I get here? You did it.
These clients are inspiring, challenging, and tenacious, and they are certainly innovative. My colleagues, Danielle, Kevin, and Colleen, you guys have worked with all kinds of interesting clients around the state, and you have great examples of innovating businesses in very creative ways. I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us about them.
So environmental innovation, eco-friendly is a pivotal component for many businesses these days, and in some cases has become a competitive advantage. I'm excited to share a few examples of Sbdc clients that are innovating in the environmental area. As you just heard, Hometown Manufacturing really rebooted themselves by going green. They sourced natural materials in order to build their trolleys. Another example in another company, Dryaway, is really built a design-friendly laundry rack to address some of the environmental concerns. And last, Compost Crusader focuses on providing composting services, but in addition, they also promote that practice through education. I'll next turn it over to Kevin, who's going to talk to you about some food and farm innovation.
One of the 3 pillars of the Wisconsin economy, of course, is agriculture. The Julian family farm up in Medford has focused on grass-fed organic beef and going farm to table, and they've seen just explosive growth. Here in Mount Horeb, Kyle LaFont founded American Providence, and using ex-NFL players as spokespeople, has grown from a regional now to almost a national basis, distributing his personal care products in just the last 6 years. Last company I'd like to talk about is Reinvent Ferment, that provides fermented food products out of Appleton. Again, they started with farmers markets originally and have now moved to grocery store shelves in the upper Midwest with plans to move beyond that into a regional and national distribution. I'll turn it over to Colleen.
Healthcare. I will start with Rachel over there, the nurse practitioner. She's actually a UW Oshkosh faculty member who walked into my office and said, I want to provide care in homes. There's so many people that can't get to the clinics, and I want to be that service for them. So she started her business, and she now has multiple locations, and she's now assisting other nurse practitioners to start their own business. We have the Birchhaven Senior Living. This is now a chain industry. And Grandpa Ray came in, and well, his name wasn't Grandpa Ray, but that is a chain that he started. He has now over 200 employees in the Oshkosh area doing healthcare. Oh, Daniel. Mm-hmm.
So tech-driven innovation is becoming more and more important to our everyday lives. And in fact, a couple of these examples show the social impact that technology innovation can have. These are a few of our clients. First, Northern Star Fire in Eau Claire is helping to save the lives of firefighters by integrating a compass technology into their helmets. In addition, Baby Express is trying to reduce infant mortality by developing an app that really helps get mothers and their babies to those very critical appointments soon after they have their babies that are very important for care. And last, Mobcraft Beer, a fun one, utilizing online polls as well as suggestions to crowdsource beer flavors. And they've really created a destination-worthy brewery. And I'll let Kevin talk next about some more companies that are in the realm of destination and placemaking.
Great, just going back, Northern Fire was last year's Governor's Business Plan winner, and this year's Governor's Business Plan winner was also an Sbdc client. So we want to promote that a little bit. So moving on to destination and placemaking, Wisconsin's got a great long history of tourism. Again, one of the three pillars that really supports our economy, and we're involved in a lot of those. The Mill, as you can see, is a repurposed historic building that's been designed into an event venue in Chautauqua, and just a wonderful place if you ever get the chance to take a peek in there. This is a personal one, Great Escape and Driftless Axe. Now, Great Escape is an escape room in La Crosse. Driftless Axe is a bar that has axe throwing axe throwing lanes, I guess is what they're called. I didn't buy their t-shirt, but I really wanted to. On the back of it, it said, "Axes and alcohol, what could go wrong?" And then the last and certainly not least, if you've been in the Third Ward, you've seen the pedal and paddle taverns around Milwaukee that you can take a road or a water trip and bar hop and participate getting from there. Again, a great Sbdc client that's had some wonderful growth. So I'll turn it over to Colleen and talk about niche markets.
Well, I think you'd be surprised how many crazy ideas come into our office and how many are doing extremely well. Treetop Explorer, are you feeling a little stressed? Would you like to see the world from a different view? You can go start climbing trees in parks around the state. Aquatherapups, this is for the little puppies that need a little bit of therapy in the water. It just is working really well. And finally, Warrior Jungle. This gentleman was on Ninja Warriors. He was one of the finalists. So if you too would like to compete, you can go get some training and head out to his gym.
It's a real privilege to work with these people, and I'll tell you, it's inspiring every day when you get to hear stories like that. Mission matters. The boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state. This outreach mission extends beyond the campus and into the life cycle of the community's economy and their families. The mission opens the doors of the university to all citizens, including small businesses, and allows them to get the mentor support they need. Access empowers innovation. This highlights a few of the offices and a few of the people we serve. We have 4 other institute programs that are equally dedicated to supporting small business, and we'll come back anytime you want to hear about them. We're passionate about this. Meeting our clients will inspire you as much as it inspires us. Thanks for your time.
Let me echo those comments. Excellent presentation from the panel. Questions from the Regents on innovation? Regent Jones.
This is for whoever wants to field this one. Do you think that there is kind of a growing appetite or maybe a growing demand for these sorts of collaborations with small businesses and startups? Is there an unmet demand out there that we are now meeting? It's kind of another way to put it.
Yeah, I will jump in, absolutely, 100%. I will say, especially with our college students, everybody thinks they're cute, so they want to work with them, and all of our businesses are willing, really, to take the time and mentor. We are very mentor-driven. These startups that have gone through all of the hurdles and all of the struggles and challenges want to give back to the young entrepreneurs. So I would say collaboration is key and is really what makes everything thrive in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I would echo some of that and add that we use the term ecosystem. There's an entrepreneurial ecosystem out there. And it doesn't matter where you enter it, we're all kind of connected. And so if you come in the side door, the front door, or the back door, you're going to get to see the entire lay. And we as Colleen was talking about, we assess and we connect them to the right resources. And so we see that as a very valuable part of us to be at the hub and connector piece for the entrepreneurial sector.
As far as identifying the actual opportunities, that's where the BDRC comes in, the Business Dynamics Research Consortium. It does industry growth over time. And to give you an example, we noticed that there was real opportunity in Waukesha County and worked out a partnership with the Waukesha Business Alliance and the County of Waukesha, and they now fund a position. So when the data tells you and the parties are right, it's a pretty easy sell.
Regent Walsh.
I would start by addressing this question to Kevin. You mentioned several times that you use student labor. I'm wondering, is this are these hourly positions? Are they educational? Are they a combination of both? How is that structured?
Yeah, the answer is really both. And so I know that this is not a new mission or not a mission that is not used elsewhere, but certainly at Whitewater, one of our missions is that if you're coming through the college, you should have the opportunity to work on real-world problems with real-world businesses without trying too hard. So we see that as being part of the opportunity, that they are paid hourly, but they also, it is part of their education, and we will use it as an internship as well.
So there's some academic component.
Absolutely, yes.
And if I might do a follow-up question. I'm wondering about, you mentioned there are a lot of student entrepreneurs who, they come up with products, they come up with ideas, and that's a very exciting process. What's the patent, who guides them through the patent process? Is that WISES? Where are the patents located, and how is licensure handled?
So that's a whole nother world, right? Patents and
Yes.
licensing and trademarks. And so I think it's very specific. So we do guide them. We have friends, I have an advisory board, and we have some legal assistants that will provide that resource. We tap into the UW-Madison Law Clinic all of the time, and then we do work closely with WISES as well.
So who holds the patents to
the students.
The students
Oh, yeah,
hold their own
100%.
patents?
Yep,
Okay.
this is all, on their own. They're doing this not part of curriculum when they're starting their own business. The accelerators, something completely different.
Thank you.
I can just add to that real quickly too, and the students that we have worked with, we try to meet the students where they are and try to help them assess which patent route will be best to suit their long-term needs. So whether it's working with WISES, which we recommend all of our students go talk to WISES right away, whether it's working directly with the United States Patent and Trademark Office and connecting with those individuals, or maybe it's working with a local attorney. We really do try to provide a wide variety of resources and coaching for the students to make the decision that's ultimately right for them.
Okay, and typically if you have to defend a patent, that's a very expensive process. Are you guiding them there too, or are they basically on their own?
We are
when it reaches that
connecting them to the right resources.
You connect them
Absolutely.
to
I'm not giving
you
legal
connect them
advice.
to the legal resources, but the financial resources is their issue.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Correct.
Good questions. Other questions? Regent Klein?
Thank you. How much consistency is there between the different SBDCs, I think they're called, and, is there a menu of services that we provide in every one of these? I know I can see we have collaboration, but do we have consistency of offerings?
I think I can answer that one, but it's my job to herd the cats, I guess. We have a set protocol that is dictated by a national accreditation process so that there are basic services at every SBDC. But Over and above that, it depends on what the campus or the partner location wants to specialize in. It doesn't make sense to have global experts on every campus, but you better be able to go to any Sbdc and get significant help with your financials or understand how to vet your idea. So there is protocols, there's specific training that each of the centers follow and do. The specialties are over and above, and it all depends on who the partner is and what the talent that our president and the centers have.
I would share this story. Our Eau Claire Center Director has a great expertise. He's a CPA, and he has a great expertise in financial projections. And so recently we ran into a cheesemaker, and we were doing financial projections, and I thought I'd plug in, and so I called Luke Kemp in the UW Eau Claire, and I said, you wouldn't have any insight into cheese making. He said, oh, I got a whole template all set up for it. Here, let me send it down to you. So milk yields, all the kinds of things that, you know, we would have to normally kind of dig around. So there's a lot of collaboration within the Sbdc network as well.
You know, we talk a lot about the education aspects of our campuses, but as President Cross kicked us off today, there's tremendous innovation. And there's, you know, as we've heard today, a tremendous amount of connection that you've got with business. What's a bit unique from my perspective is I work for a large business, but I'm certainly familiar with developing businesses. The first place I would go to look wouldn't necessarily be my local UW campus, and I think you've all overcome that because of your success and your outreach. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of influence, you know, aspiring businesses that aren't students to come and seek your services? Is it success-based, or how do you market yourself?
Yeah, let me speak on that a little bit. As part of the River Falls EDC, we have an active program called the Business Retention and Expansion, and we have gone out and met with every business in the 4 business parks that we have in River Falls. And we are finding that all of the businesses are struggling to find employees at any level. And they're recognizing that now what they need to do is start to find those employees before they hire them. Through internships, youth apprenticeship initiatives, job shadowing, and even having students at any level tour the businesses. But the internships are an active way for them to get to know students, for the students to get involved in the businesses. And we've got one company that I think does 8 interns a year, and they have hired a number of those interns after they've graduated from school. So it's an active program, and I think all businesses are probably going to, in some way or another, adopt these practices because it's so hard to find their future employees.
I would also add, we have great relationships with the bankers, with the lawyers, with the EDOs, with all sorts of different places, and they're referring them to us. Someone's coming in looking for a loan and they're not prepared. Their business strategy has not been outlined, so they're referring to us consistently. I'll give you one example. We had a bank that called us. They were ready to call the loans on this company. 250 employees, they were showing a loss for the last 3 years of over $1 million. Within 6 months, we were able to turn that company around. These are the stories we can't talk about because everything's confidential. So it is really getting in the weeds, but it is definitely through referrals and just the success that we have had from some of our partners that a lot of these clients are finding us.
And at that entry level, we've got really 2 programs that I'd like to highlight. One is our Madison campus here developed what's called First Steps Online. So if somebody's thinking about, do I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? 30 to 90 minutes to go through. It's free, it's online, and we'll give you kind of an entrepreneurial score and say, you know, maybe not you or maybe not yet, or gee, you seem to have a lot of what it takes. Additionally, statewide, we have the Entrepreneurial Training Program, which is a series of educational pieces that lead you through and coach you through building a business plan. Our stats are that 70% of the folks that go through that and start their business are still in business 5 years ago, which is obviously much higher than the general population.
Excellent. One final question, Regent Mueller.
Thank you. How well are we doing in serving persons of color and older workers?
You know, we don't capture ages in our demographic data collection, but a third of our clients are minorities, and we do track that on an ongoing basis and by region.
I've got personal privilege over here. The president has one question, so he's going to bat out of order and ask it.
I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Wisconsin is it's been widely stated that Wisconsin lags the nation in startups. However, those that persevere after 5 years, we tend to lead most states, which spoke to your comment earlier, Kevin. I'm starting to sense that, this is principally SBDCs all over the country tend to serve what I refer to as Main Street development, and I think Bonds talked about mostly retail, a lot of retail and that stuff. I'm sensing that you're broadening that, which is good, and I think there's a flavor for that. But is the university doing what it needs to do to be a better partner with the state of Wisconsin to better stimulate the development and startup of new businesses?
No. I think there can be a larger focus on entrepreneurial activity in the state of Wisconsin. I see a lot of universities throughout the country that entrepreneurship, innovation, staying relevant is embedded in curriculum across all disciplines. And it needs to be. Our landscape is changing so quickly, and these students are having to be entrepreneurial as well. It is finding solutions when they're working for someone. It's that critical thinking. So we are trying to engage the students with real companies, bring this into the classroom, do as much as we can to have these students start thinking on a different way. So I think there has to be more attention on that entrepreneurial educational piece.
And I'll add one piece, because I agree with that, but Wisconsin is what Wisconsin is. We are agriculture and manufacturing, and those are two very stable and long-term sectors. So there's not a lot of volatility in that. And volatility is what creates all the opportunities. So we are at the top of the country in small business development. If you look at the same group, Kauffman, that does the study on entrepreneurship, we're near the top in business development of our small businesses. But we are who we are. We have stable, long-term sectors that drive our economy. We have 12 core business statistical areas where most, Minnesota has 3 or 4. So we have vibrant little communities that are living off of manufacturing and agriculture, and we're starting to kind of make inroads in some of these ideas of entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship happens at all different levels, and you saw all the different types of innovation ones there. So I think we can always do more, and I think entrepreneurship of these campuses outside of kind of Madison and Milwaukee are starting to bubble and to boil. It's been boiling and working in Madison and Milwaukee. So there's room to grow there, but we also are who we are.
When Charles Van Hise wrote an editorial in the New York Times in 1918, he was defending the role of the public university and its impact on the people it serves, the state people it serves. And he juxtaposed the public university against a private university and talked about that. And of course, he had been educated under Bascom. And part of that whole issue was public university has to have an impact on the people it serves, which led to the evolution of what we now call the Wisconsin idea. And the reason I asked that question, and Colleen, thank you for being honest. I never expected anything different with my voice. But I think it's important. What should the university be doing to more effectively embrace that Wisconsin idea and bring not only the problems the state faces to the university, but the university dealing with those problems to advance the people of the state and the businesses and the communities we serve? And I think you're at the front of that. And the question that I think Regent Peterson asked is, are we the university in this process sufficiently helping people by letting them know how do they come to you? How do they get connected to the university? And I think that's part of our challenge, but doing tremendous work, and how do we expand it and more effectively connect it to the real problems and challenges people, businesses of the state face. So thank you.
With that, we do need to move on. Let's give Colleen, Danielle, Kevin, Dale, Vaughn, and Mark a great round of applause. Thank you very much to the panel. In April, we had a very compelling presentation focused on the serious and growing challenges to student behavioral health on our UW campuses and how those issues are affecting learning in the classroom and overall student success. This problem is hardly unique to Wisconsin, and we join institutions across the country in trying to find out viable solutions. Many regents, including myself, were not surprised, but were deeply impacted and felt compelled to do something about it. So today we've asked several presenters to return before the board to help explain what we're going to do now and address these significant challenges and what more we can do in the future. We will then turn our attention to focusing on action and a proposed structure and approach for that, and identifying gaps in current behavioral health services areas where greater capacity building is needed and innovative approaches can potentially be adopted system-wide. So leading the discussion today will be Chris Navia, our AVP for Student Success, and she is joined by Harry Anderson, Dean of Students at UW Superior, and Sandra Scott is back from UW Stout. Welcome, and thank you for being back so soon.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Regent President Peterson, Regents, President Cross. Thank you once again for the opportunity to again continue the conversation around student behavioral health. Again, my name is Harry Anderson. I serve as the pleasure of serving as Dean of Students and Senior Student Affairs Officer at the University of Wisconsin Superior. With me today, Sandy Scott, Senior Student Affairs Officer at Stout, and Associate Vice President at UW System for Student Success, Chris Navia. Today, we hope to provide a brief update on the work that has occurred since April and our proposal on how we can continue this conversation moving forward. Back in April, we discussed the National College Health Assessment data and how it compares to UW for our UW System students. You heard directly, and I think felt emotionally, from 3 outstanding students about the challenges and opportunities that our campuses are facing. And we engaged in the first of many conversations around this topic. So, what's happened since April? Lots of work has been done. Our conversation garnered attention across the state and the press. Campuses engaged in further discussions with campus leadership teams amongst senior student affairs officers. Interviews happened with my colleagues from UW Stout with Wisconsin Public Radio, senior student affairs officers. We did an inventory of our campus services. We examined the needs of what we need on our individual campuses. Counseling center directors have developed early recommendations for us to explore. There were several calls for collaboration around this topic. UW System Administration was approached by the Wisconsin Center for Suicide Awareness for potential partnership opportunities. My colleague Sandy Scott, SSAO at Stout, and Dr. Tammy McGuckin, Senior Student Affairs Officer at UW Parkside, presented at the Speaker's Task Force on Suicide Prevention. Lastly, several student affairs officers, senior student affairs officers, spent time together at the end of the May, continuing to brainstorm ideas on how we can address the needs of our students as a system to continue these conversations. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Sandy Scott to continue the conversation.
You may recall that in April we introduced to you the framework that we have adopted from the University of California system for us to sort of continue to explore this topic. And so as SSAOs, this is the framework we're using, and when you see in a bit how we're proposing moving forward, we think this framework serves us very, very well as a way to sort of think about the services we provide and how we can really improve upon those. So just as a refresher for most folks and for the folks who are seeing it for the first time, there's really 3 tiers that we're talking about around student behavioral health. The first is for those students who are most at risk for self-harm and suicide. What we need to focus on is how can we reduce wait times, how can we ensure that we're providing timely service and our staffing levels to make sure that we are appropriately staffed in being able to meet those needs of those students who are most at risk. Tier 2 is targeted interventions, and you may recall hearing from our students about some of the needs for specific populations, some of them identified in such a way, and how important it was that counseling staff understood the unique needs of certain vulnerable populations. And then finally in Tier 3, and this is where it's very proactive, it's really about creating those healthy learning environments so that we can build resiliency in our students and really create situations where faculty, staff, and students are all engaged in a culture of reporting and in healthy choices. So today what we want to do is we want to provide you a high level. Each of the campuses has done a deeper dive into looking at these tiers. Where do we have certain strengths? Where are we weak? And the next step moving forward will be to develop some recommendations around that. One of the things you'll see is we have strengths across the system in all areas, and we have areas where we're weak in all areas, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Regent Tiedemann, when he was at Stout this week, asked a really important question. He said, I think it would be helpful to know where we're doing well and where we need work. And so I said he anticipated what was going to happen today. We're going to show you some of that. So in Tier 1, and these are just some of the buckets, but in Tier 1, one of the things that we know is that all of our campuses, of course, are providing counseling and health services. There's not a campus that doesn't offer that. So I do want to caution you that when you see all UW institutions in a particular, we'll call these buckets, it doesn't necessarily mean because it says all UW institutions that we are not going to focus continued conversation around that. Far from it. But what we know is that we have a starting base there of all of the campus are in some way addressing that. I'm not going to talk about each one of these in the essence of time, but I am going to focus on one on each of the tiers just to give you a framework again for how we're thinking about this work. So on this first tier, which again is the students who are most in crisis for self-harm or potentially for suicide, all of our campuses do have either a care team or a behavior intervention team. It gets called different things at different campuses, but it's that interdisciplinary team that serves as a vortex for information coming into so that the team of experts around that table can determine what is the best sort of intervention for that particular student who has come to the attention of that particular group. Again, these are typically, why it fits in with this tier, our highest risk students, the students who are most in danger potential of harm. I would advocate that I know firsthand that behavior intervention teams and care teams have saved lives of students. There is no doubt in my mind that every campus can relay multiple times probably where because of those teams being put in place and the ability to hopefully identify the students who are most at risk and then to be able to align them with the appropriate service, we make a huge difference. It's also important though to note, so again, one could look at that and say, oh great, that's happening. While we're doing that work well, we really didn't have in any of our workloads 10, 12 years ago, behavior intervention teams just didn't exist. It wasn't something that occurred on campuses. It's now a significant part of our work of multiple offices, and so it means that all of us have continued work to do around there because most of us didn't get increased staffing for implementing those kinds of teams. So we think very creatively about that. There's also the opportunity for perhaps professional association membership because there are national professional associations that deal with providing resources and structure for those behavior intervention teams. So that's the type of thing as we look at these tiers that SSAOs and others have spent some time around and that we'll be continuing to do that. Targeted interventions, which again focuses on those student populations that are particularly vulnerable, experience really high levels of stress and anxiety. This is where one of the things I will highlight here, UW-Madison has all of their mental health providers participate in a 12-hour gender identity training. We know from all the research, and you may recall from our presentation, LGBTQ population is one of the highest populations at risk for suicide and self-harm. Is it possible for all of our campuses to be able to have that 12-hour training so that our counselors can all be better equipped to deal with particular vulnerable groups around perhaps gender identity? So this is target interventions is an area that we'll be focusing on. And then finally, and this is where we get the most bang for our buck, if we can really come up with some innovative solutions, put resources and strategy and creative thought into what can we be doing at this healthy learning environment level, we know we'll get the best return on our investment. Because hopefully if we're doing this really, really well, that first tier will be needed less because we've been able to create resiliency in our students and be able to promote a campus culture of reporting where everyone sees it as their role to help those students, faculty, and staff who may be in distress. So we continue to use this three-tiered model as we go forward and continue to do this work. And now Harry's going to share with you how we hope to propose to continue to this conversation and result in some recommendations.
So how do we move this work forward? What we are proposing are work groups for each tier. So work group for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. We comprise these work groups, the membership of subject matter experts who live this day in and day out. We are proposing that senior student affairs officers lead each of these work groups as they have that institutional perspective and can connect the dots from each functional unit that address this on a day-to-day basis. You can see on our slide the membership that is not highlighted in red really is experts that float across all three tiers. And highlighted in red would be subject matter experts that really are experts within this tier. So we know when there is a critical behavioral health crisis or response, there is a really good chance that university police or campus safety will be involved, and it's essential to have their expertise at the table. You can see each tier will then also have focus areas that they will work on. Among many things, you can see for Tier 1, it's going to help determine what are the appropriate levels of service and how do we need to staff to make sure we are meeting students' need to help keep them successful and successful in the classroom as well. You can see with Tier 2, we follow a similar fashion. Again, leadership by a senior student affairs officer, membership of subject matter experts, and then adding in again those subject matter experts specific for each of these tiers. So ability or disability services, a senior diversity officer, and a representative from UW System Administration Policy Office to help address some of the focus areas in Tier 2. We see a prime example in Tier 2 to work on would be those additional trainings, as Sandy had mentioned, that Madison does to work with some of our vulnerable populations. And again, a third tier work group to focus on that proactive approach. And as Sandy said, I do also believe that this is our best bang for our buck where we can make a significant impact. I know we've done that at UW Superior, and other institutions have continued to do this as well. We see 2 senior student affairs officers, again, membership, adding in health promotions, someone from the recreation, residence life, student activities, because those are typically the areas on campuses that are doing a lot of the educational pieces on the front end, and again, with multiple focus areas and hopefully leading to building resiliency in the long run. So at the end of our work with each of our tiers, what do we really hope the deliverables are going to be? And I think there's going to be many of them, but we've kind of boiled it down to a handful. So I think first of all, we're going to see an improved service for students. We're going to have a reduction in wait times. We're going to be able to meet students' needs when they are in crisis in a more effective manner. We're going to have students that hopefully are more resilient in the long run. We're going to have students with better coping skills. And we're going to develop that, hopefully, that peer support where students consider each other as peers and want to be able to help each other out. We hope to also have that resilient student that when they graduate and join the Wisconsin workforce will lead to a more resilient workforce in the state of Wisconsin. And last but certainly not least, we hope to develop a culture of care, not just for our students, but also for those that are day-to-day on the front lines working with our students, to be able to make sure that they are able to manage their workload and have care for themselves. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Navia to talk about the timeline and other opportunities.
Good afternoon, everybody. So these work groups are a bit different than a normal task force. Task forces tend to get a really big launch, and then we don't hear from them probably until a good 12 months. We know that we can't afford that time. We have to act with greater urgency. Our students are in need. There's a great demand to get some solutions. So what we've proposed is to do these work groups and have them bring out rolling recommendations as they come upon solutions. And as Harry mentioned earlier, we've already got a set of potential recommendations from mental health center directors across the system. These work groups will take up those recommendations, vet them. If it comes to things like, for example, an online resource program, we'd want people to test those things out and then determine if that's something we should adopt system-wide. So what we're thinking about is a whole series of rolling recommendations throughout the year. We've already done some significant pre-work, so we've started those campus inventories. We still have a lot more to do. We met in April. The SSAO sat down in May and started to really chart this course. So we've not let any grass really grow under our feet, but we have to get that inventory far more complete than it is right now. Again, we're going to look at those existing recommendations, and we've already started to identify sort of critical resource needs and partnerships. So there's some pre-work that's gone on, started in May, will continue through August. We're hoping to launch in September, probably by the third week. We would launch these formal work groups and then leave it to them to determine their schedules and how they're going to attack the work as each individual group. From October through March, this is the ongoing work, identifying these solutions, thinking about implementation, thinking about what it costs in terms of finances, people, human resources, and then coming to you throughout those months where appropriate and asking, making presentations on the solutions we think we should adopt system-wide. So we're hoping to come to you on a more regular basis. April would be sort of a capstone presentation. That would be the point where we review all the work that we've done over the last year, come up with potentially a final set of recommendations. There are going to be short-term strategies that we think we can implement pretty quickly, but there are going to be some longer-term strategies that are going to take some time to set up. So we'll have a final report for you there and then outline next steps. We know that this work is going to be iterative and continuous. Our job right now is to try to just keep pace, right? And if we can do that, I think students will be better off. So that's sort of the proposed kind of outline of it. Obviously, we'll have to make adjustments as we go along given the progress, but that's the proposed timeline. The other thing I just wanted to mention to you is that there are things that we are doing specifically at the system level. So the work groups are really campus-based. They're very campus-focused. They're going to be with the folks who are on the front line working with students every day in some capacity. But there is work that we need to do at the system level. So we've started identifying resources in my office, state and federal grant opportunities. I just have this keen sense we're leaving a lot of money on the table because we aren't writing grants. We aren't out there soliciting financial support from state and federal authorities, so we'll need to do that. We're also going to be taking a more disaggregated cut, as I like to think of it, so thinking about specific resources we can tap around veteran students, for example, Native American students. I mean, there are lots of grants that are specific to certain student populations. So we'll be thinking about going after those, identifying those grants, and then going after them as well. We're continuing to explore state and national partnerships. We mentioned at the beginning the Wisconsin Center for Suicide Awareness came to us. They've already identified a grant opportunity. The grant will open in, I believe, late August, early September. It is specifically focused on veterans behavioral health. We'll be participating in that grant, writing it. That organization in particular just opened up an office here in Madison, and they actually have worked with some of our institutions providing training around suicide awareness and prevention. The JED Foundation is a national foundation. They work with campuses. They also work with high schools and grade schools, but their work in the college and university arena is really around helping institutions create more integrative approaches to mental health. So we think if we approach them and say, how would you like to work in Wisconsin, they could help us actually kind of review some of the services that we provide and help us think about how we build the capacity of institutions to actually do this work to greater degree. We also have DPI as a partner, so we're going to be talking to them on a more regular basis about the work that we need to do when our students are making that transition from grade school, middle school, and high school to our institutions. Other efforts that I'm sort of been thinking about, One is a more holistic approach to behavioral health. It is the case in our system that we have students with growing what we call food and housing insecurity. So students who struggle with getting enough to eat and who don't always have a stable living situation. It's easy to imagine that that's a cause of a lot of anxiety and stress. And in Sandy's opening remarks back in April, we talked about this philosophy of providing support for the whole student. That means not only their behavioral health, but their physical health. These things are tied together. We have a number of food pantries and emergency grant aid programs. We should be looking at those and thinking about how we're tying them in to all of our behavioral health efforts across the system as well. So that's, and I think that that's fairly, that's a bit innovative as we think about it. We tend to do one or the other in our system. Nationwide, folks tend to focus on one or the other. The conversation is beginning to change. So if we can figure out what that model looks like here in Wisconsin, I think we're able to then sort of lead the way for the other states across the country. And then finally, it's just capacity building. One of the places where we tend to, and I'll just put it this way, fall down is on that professional development and that continuous training. We really need to figure out continuous cycles where institutions and the practitioners at those institutions really have a chance to continue refining their knowledge base and refining their skills. That may mean in some ways we actually provide some of that. We've been talking and bandying the idea around of maybe a behavioral health summit, a system-wide summit, where we bring the experts to the campuses. It's more cost effective. We can cover all of our institutions at once. And then thinking about growing our own programs. I mean, we create new degree programs and new certificates every day. There's a lot to do in this arena as well, I think. We just have to get the right people around the table and sit down and think through, for example, for nurse practitioners. We told you back in April that a lot of our student health nurses in those centers, right, end up actually seeing students for behavioral health issues. They'll need additional certification and training. That might be something that some of our institutions take up as well. Again, that's a longer term, longer range opportunity, but these are the kinds of things we're already starting to think about and talk about at the system. Are there questions?
I'm certain there are questions, and I see hands start to rise. I'd like to make just a couple of comments, if I could, to start. First, an apology to Harry and Sandy. I now realize that you ran that presentation, and it makes sense to me because I watched what Chris did, which was take all of my feedback to her, hand it off for you to do the work, and then she the timeline. It's called excellent supervision. In all sincerity, when I sat down with President Croix to talk about things that we wanted to invest in during certainly my term as president, I wouldn't say I demanded, but I asked very strongly that he dedicated the financial and operational resources for us to put a focus on this. And then I shifted quickly to Chris and said, we're going to talk this through. And I want to make sure that we can do things. We're not going to solve these issues in the short-term way, but I think there's a number of things that we can do in very short order because your focus has been on this. So in your presentation, all of the proposed work group composition, we're striking the word proposed. That was always guaranteed that we'd be doing that work. And it's a necessity that we do that work. What I'm most happy about, and I do want to get feedback from the rest of my colleagues, is the charge that I gave to you was to mobilize your troops and then put together a timeline that wasn't on traditional academic calendars. And what we see here is within 6 months, we'll have a very, I think, thorough assessment of where we stand, but we'll also have that check-in along the way. We're calling it a capstone, but it's a short-term capstone. But if we do anything to move the needle, I think that's a victory. And I have every confidence that we're going to be able to move the needle a great deal because I know the resources are there. I know that the initiative of our campuses is behind this. And it's something we've frankly got to do. So I want to say thank you to you for that. Thank you to President Croix and our campus leaders for dedicating the resources to focus on that. And I can't wait to see what the results bear, and I'm confident they'll bear fruit. So with that, questions?
I noticed on your list of the three Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 working groups that you had faculty listed. I didn't see staff listed outside of counseling staff. And I would just suggest that you might want to consider involving them. And I'm talking about staff outside of traditional counseling roles. When I worked at engineering here, I saw over and over again a huge number of students who confided in student support staff, things that they would never confide to their parents, they would never confide to their faculty advisor. These relationships develop into Christmas cards, come to my child's christening. These people are right on the ground, observing very close up when someone is in trouble or not. I don't know that many of them get any training in this, and I think they could be a really valuable resource for you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Olivia, Regent Woodmansee.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's absolutely excellent to see so much time and effort put into this. My question's regarding the working groups as well, and that is, I see you have students listed in all three. How will you select these students? I'm just particularly interested in the Tier 1 groups because I definitely don't want to re-traumatize students for the works that they're going through, but I also think it's really valuable to have someone who's had personal experiences in that Tier 1 group, in those Tier 2 groups, in those Tier 3 groups. So how will you go on selecting those students?
Well, I think we can share who our Tier 1 student is, probably, because she's agreed. Hoping that the proposed would be taken away and we'd be able to move forward, we've started thinking about this. And actually, you will remember Anjali, who was one of the student presenters, is continuing now as a student in the UW system, moving from Parkside to Whitewater. She's already agreed to be our Tier 1 student because, of course, we were very cognizant we would never want to re-traumatize someone. And then one of the things I don't know if we mentioned is across all of those work groups, we have representation from across the system. We were very conscientious about that, and we worked with the SSAOs at each campus to work with their campus to, so for example, let's just say UW Superior has, their opening is for a student. It was worked with through that SSAO and their campus to determine who that student would be. So when we are finally able to release the work groups, I think you'll see that they are cross-representational, and we made sure that any student who's there was vetted and wanted to be a part of that and understood that the conversation could be triggering, right, for some folks.
Thank you.
Regent Tiedemann.
Chris, Harry, Sandy, thank you very much for the presentation. I was wondering if maybe one or perhaps each of you could speak to the regionalization potential for referral of care between the campuses and local service providers and the sharing of information between campuses as you move through this process.
I'll start. So I think, thank you for the question. I think when you look at that, I'll use psychiatric services as the example, right? So at UW Superior, we have 8 hours a month for psychiatric services, which at this point for our campus does not necessarily always meet the demand that's there. So I think one of the proposed concepts that could be out there is there an opportunity to take institutions that are within close proximity of each other and share that resource amongst them to increase the amount of time that our students get with those services? And so if you look from that perspective, Superior, Stout, River Falls, Eau Claire, I think there's a good opportunity there to see if we can increase those number of hours. I think the sharing of information across, I think that's going to take a little more research by our work group teams to see how we could do that effectively and efficiently, and I think it's definitely an opportunity to look to explore.
I think one of the other things, because I think part of your question too was the potential for regionalization and collaboration perhaps with other partners that are not necessarily, right? And one of the things from the speakers task force and listening to the other presentations that day when my colleague from Parkside and I had the opportunity to speak was that in rural communities, there is just such a deficit of psychiatric and psychological care. And so, for example, from a regionalization or partnering perspective, one of the things we just learned is that Mayo up by us in Eau Claire is going to be bringing in, for the first time ever, psychiatric interns. The minute we heard that, we're thinking, is there a way we can partner with Mayo and psychiatric interns to perhaps, at least in that part of the state, and then if we can there, is that a possibility in other parts of the state? That's one of the things that the work group would be looking at, is what are the partnerships there? Again, innovative thinking around that potentially.
And Tori, I would just say that I think what we're going to see is a need for some door openings, some initial conversations, some introductions to be made on behalf of the institutions. I'm certainly happy to play that part, but that may be something we come to you and ask you as regents for help with as well. Who you know in those regions, who else we might be able to, who we should be talking to, right? I think we've expanded the conversation. I'm just happy. I think we're going to end up seeing a lot of offers for help and partnership. And so, but we don't always, at this point, we don't always know who that is. So again, that's going to be part of the inventory, taking it, you know, what's in that region. And we clearly have regions where we have more resources than others, right? So how do we start thinking about moving some of those resources to those underserved areas? So it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot.
And Regent Bechtel.
I just have one follow-up, and then the benefit being twofold in the sense that the more resources that you have putting towards crisis and triage, you'll have then hopefully more resources freed up for preventative programs.
That's the goal.
Yep.
Regent Bechtel.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the focus and emphasis on this, just from a leadership level. I think it's very important. Obviously, the April program and the statistics and what we learned there was very important. And as a newer region, and as I'm getting around the campuses, I'm hearing from students directly and from faculty about, I don't know if crisis is too much of an exaggeration of a word. It may not be. I mean, this is critical, and I think it is something that many of us are leaning in and want to make sure that we are allowing all of our students to be the very best that they can be, and that unlimited ceiling, that unlimited potential that we should all share in and foster. So thank you very much for what you're doing. I love the fact, too, that we are doing this in an iterative process, as you've said, that we're not following perhaps a traditional academic model or a lot of study and not a lot of action. So let's act and let's move. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because there is a need for us to move forward. The one thing I'm looking at kind of at the end of the slide, number 10, capstone presentation, I'm assuming that we'll get a final report with recommendations from the work groups. It'll be very granular and organic, which I applaud. I like the idea of the local partners and the resources that we may not know yet that we have that we can access. So yes, as a system, we're accountable and responsible, but I think we're going to find other partners that will join us if we can be that beacon. But, you know, I would like to see the resources, the budget, the personnel, some of the granular business focus that I think we can bring to this and marry with this partnership as we proceed. So just kind of a few more fine points in the April presentation.
I think that's right. And you know, I think we'll have multiple touch points between now and then so that we're heading towards that level of granularity that we're looking for. And because we're going to have multiple touch points, I want President Cross to have the last word before we move to our last item today. So with that, President Cross.
We need for you to be very honest about what is deficient on each of these campuses, that don't cover it up with proposed or stuff like that. So that leads me to this question. Rather than measuring the inputs, and we do need to know the budget, the personnel, and the resources needed, I got that. Let's measure outputs. How will we determine whether or not what you are doing will in fact change the numbers? So is one number wait time?
Yes.
I don't know. How do you measure that? What's your baseline, and how do you know if you've had a delta in that process? So when you come back to us in the capstone report, we need to know this is how we're going to measure our success or failure. We need to be very honest about this. There's just too much at stake, okay?
Great, absolutely. Okay, got it.
And my sense is we'll have several preliminary measures that will likely move to permanent measures that will move to analytics, which is great. With that, thank you all.
Thank you.
Our final topic for today turns our attention to the pre-planning for anticipated changes to UW's system's shared financial system and human resource system. Oracle PeopleSoft is currently being used for these two applications, and they're hosted on-premise by UW-Madison's Division of Information Technology and supported by a range of operations across the UW system. While updates have been implemented in recent years, it's been determined these current financial and human resource enterprise resource planning systems are not serving the diverse needs of our UW institutions. Looking ahead, to a likely future conversion to a cloud-based system, UW System Administration and UW-Madison have invested over a year assessing current systems, processes, spending, risks, alternatives, and potential costs. Today we'll hear an update on the progress of this assessment and the pre-planning process. Leading our presentation will be UW Systems Vice President of Administration, Rob Kramer, and UW-Madison's Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration, Lauren Heller. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the time today. The Vice Chancellor and I will move fairly quickly through our presentation to leave any time for questions. For some of you who've been on business and finance in the past, this may be a little bit repetitive, but we thought it'd be useful to do some level setting of where we are and why we're looking at our financial and human resources systems, not just the technology behind them, but the business processes, the data reporting, the information security that relate to those. As the President noted, we currently use Oracle PeopleSoft for our shared financial system and our human resources system. The financials originally went in 1999 and have been updated since then. The human resources went in 2011 and have been updated since then. So at a high level, we start out in a very good place using single systems of record for both of these. But as Vice Chancellor Heller will share, it's not quite as simple when you dig into the details.
Yeah, that is true, unfortunately. As Regent Peterson mentioned, this project and the need for the project found its roots in two different assessments that were done over the last year in UW-Madison and at UW System, looking at how do we really achieve this core business functionality of the university currently, how do our business processes work, how are those supported by the systems, and what's the overall, process by which we do HR, finance, even student work, student systems work and reporting. And at Madison, what we found was that the environment leaves some room for improvement. I think it's safe to say system feels the same way. At UW-Madison, this work uncovered a network of 350 shadow and bolt-on systems, to give one example of the sort of findings that we had. Just to name one little detail in there, we found that we had 33 different general ledger implementations on our campus, making up for the fact that we didn't have timely financials that were exactly what we would want coming from the shared financial system. Of course, these shadow systems come with costs, and that's a significant issue that we want to address. But beyond that, perhaps more importantly, they add risk and uncertainty, possibility for error, and complicate things like changing processes, modernizing what we do, and items like internal controls and information security.
As you may know, technology in this space is moving away from on-premise systems to cloud-based solutions. And so when we looked at what is the right planning horizon for this, one of our questions was, do we really need to do this, or is there the ability to run our existing systems for quite some additional time? I think where we landed was it really is a question of a when, not if. Oracle PeopleSoft is committed to maintaining the current environment through about 2030, which sounds like quite a ways away. But when you walk backwards from there in terms of the things that have to be done to make sure we have a smooth transition to a cloud environment and really spend time on the hard work of business process standardization, really thinking about the type of information members of the board, chief financial officers, and others need from these systems, you don't have that much time between now and then. And so as we looked at the options and spoke with the president and Chancellor Blank, we really looked at, do we do this now or do we wait for 3 to 5 years? Pros and cons in both places. But coming out of that, we concluded this is really the time to start moving forward, to get going with the pre-planning more aggressively. So we brought this to the Business and Finance Committee in February and have since then been reporting to them on progress and wanted to bring it to the full board today for your first introduction to the topic.
Yeah, and I think leadership has determined that we believe the time is now and not later to do this. Fortunately for us, these projects are now getting more mature across the country. Many businesses have already made this transition, and indeed many universities have already completed or are already substantially through similar projects. So we've taken the opportunity to learn from our colleagues, not just in universities, but elsewhere too. The team has done visits to 4 different universities at this point, learning about the things that went well and the things that went less well at other universities who have done projects along these lines. We've also taken the time to really investigate our own history and projects here that went well or less well. What made those good? What made them bad? One thing we point out on the slide here, the Legislative Audit Bureau did a review of the implementation of the human resources system that found several substantial problems with that. One of the most key ones that's highlighted in that document, but also in our work around the country, and was also mentioned by CIO Stephen Hopper earlier today in the Business and Finance Committee meeting, is the number one thing we've heard across the country is make sure you plan this carefully. You measure twice and you cut once, and you know what you're doing as you're doing this. So we're taking the planning efforts really seriously and not assuming we just know how to do this right away and we'll just whack it in.
So some of the preparatory work that is underway is highlighted here. While the focus to date has been really understanding the environment at UW-Madison and UW System Administration, we are partway through site visits to UW-Milwaukee and all of the other comprehensives to gather information about the current situation there to really inform the business case that we bring back to the Board of Regents when it is time to act on an actual project and approval. I would really highlight that second item. And I think this is something we've heard from a number of the institutions we've visited. You're not just doing the project, you really need to be thinking about how are you going to keep this new environment running in an ongoing fashion, because being in a cloud environment is very different than being on premise. And you have to think through that very carefully before you get into the project, because when you're coming out of the project, it's too late to get it right. It takes a different set of technical skills. It takes a different set of business processes. There are a lot of things that you may be doing in your customized environment that you cannot do in a cloud-based environment. And the time to think about that is at the front end. It's not when you're coming out of the project.
Yeah, so, I think that's one key way in which we see this project, not just as a technology project, but really this is a people, process, policy, and technology project to try to really reform and improve the way we deliver finance and HR services. It'll be a big culture change project. So, if I said we wanted to be cautious in how we plan it and make sure we do the planning right, we also want to be moving with all deliberate speed, so we're balancing that. As you see on this chart, we've initiated a formal pre-planning process with the Business and Finance Committee back in February, and we've been moving forward along this trajectory since then. Over the summer here, over the next month or two, we'll be finishing up the project governance structure and how we'll be making decisions and running this project. Also importantly, this work that Rob alluded to, gathering requirements, understanding what's out there and what the business case is. The team's doing fantastic work on that, really across the system, and that'll be wrapping up here in the next month or two. And all of this will give us what we need in order to begin a procurement process around picking a piece of software, but also a implementation partner to move through this so that we can be ready to run with this thing in the spring, early summer of next year if we decide we're going forward now. So rather than keep talking at you, maybe it'd be good to just open up for some questions or comments.
Question of the Regents, Regent Atwell.
Yeah, thank you for your attention to this. And one of the things that I have said, I think on the side, but I'd like to say directly, is sometimes when things are this complex, there's power in information control. And so I am concerned about the level of resistance that you might encounter as you go through this process. I don't disagree that it's important to do it right.
Right.
But at the risk of sounding a little bit too ironic, when we think of 33 applications of general ledger system at Madison alone, if I could recap, you've cited that it leads to a lack of timely and accurate information. It's associated with higher fraud risk, higher information security risk, and fiscal inefficiency.
Yep.
Are there any other problems with the current system?
I imagine there are some additional problems, but we can leave the list there, I think.
Okay. Well, I understand it's a complex environment with a lot of different personalities, but it is of great importance that you have the support necessary from the Regents to get the work done. And I've been in a decentralized environment, and I understand why people want control of their own information, but it's not working.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Regent Atwell. Yeah, I would say one heartening fact, certainly at the Madison campus, has been the campus's appetite for this. When really confronted with the complexity of our current business processes and the like, so far, really from all quarters, people have had a great appetite for us getting into this. As we get into the more painful portions of the project, instead of the visioning parts of the project, I'm sure we will encounter more resistance, but right now everyone is really on board.
And I would add on that, as we go through the project itself, I think it's very important we ensure a high degree of transparency for the board on where we are with this. So one of the threads of work is going to be an independent quality assurance partner. I would anticipate they would directly report to the Chair of Audit and Chair of Business and Finance, so those committees have good direct visibility into how we're doing on the project and not get a filtered view.
Makes a lot of sense. Regent Whitburn.
As the recent Chair of Business and Finance, together with Regent Atwell as the Vice Chair, since our initial briefing in February on the need for this project, we have in each of our successive meeting reports to the full board made reference to this project. Secondly, we have nudged our colleagues here to be prepared to come here today to address the full board, so we begin to understand the breadth, the significance, and also ultimately the price tag that's going to be involved here. So then the question is, how does this project square with our budget process, and at what time does it impact on the real world of UW system budget, and what do we do about that? So that's more of a rhetorical question, something that I think we all together need to be thinking about. But let me ask the two of you at this point, at what point do you expect that you'll be able to come to the board to say, here is about what we're going to do, and here is about what we should be thinking about in terms of a price tag?
So I think our original hope in February was to do that by October. I don't know if we'll have all the information in October or if it's December or February, but I would certainly hope by February.
And certainly prior to completing the pre-planning project and moving into later stages.
Regent Mueller.
Thank you. You've heard me say before, these systems are rarely on time or on budget or with the functionality that we need, but Regent Whitburn and I have spoken about this, and certainly as long as we have these shadow and bolt-on systems, we have a risk. So some of the briefings that will occur as we move forward will be joint hearings between audit and business and finance. So I hope that gives some comfort to our colleagues as we do our best to try to oversee this enormous project. Thank you for all you've done so far.
Thank you.
Yes, I would echo that. Any Additional comments from Regents? President Cross.
The most important element in that list of things you have to do is standardize business processes. We can't automate 47 different things. We're doing the same thing and standardizing those processes, and that has nothing to do with the technology, but everything to do with manually, how do you do this in what order? So that takes time.
It does. Gentlemen, thank you for the update.
Thank you very much.
At this time, I'll ask all board members to stay in place and provide Regent Greeby the same amount of enthusiastic listening as you did to me as he takes us into closed session.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to move into closed session for the following reasons. A, to consider a student request for review of a UW-Madison disciplinary decision as permitted by Section 19.85 1A, F, and G of the Wisconsin statutes. B, to consider emeritus status for the UW Stout Chancellor as permitted by Section 19.85 1F of the Wisconsin statutes. C, to consider personnel evaluations of chancellors as permitted by Section 19.85 1C of the Wisconsin statutes. D, to confer with legal counsel concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to pending litigation and potential litigation in which it is likely to become involved regarding a contract as permitted by Section 1985 1G of the Wisconsin statutes. And E, consider the acceptance of a confidential gift and the naming of a facility at UW-Milwaukee as permitted by Section 1985 1E of the Wisconsin statutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Regent Peterson?
Yes.
Regent Greeby?
Yes.
Regent Atwell?
Yes.
Regent Bechtel?
Yes.
Regent Delgado? Regent Hall? Regent Jones? Regent Jones? Regent Klein?
We need that trolley.
Regent Levzo? Regent Manny Deeds? Regent Mueller?
Yes.
Regent Peterson?
Yes.
Regent Plant? Regent Stanford Taylor?
Yes.
Regent Tiedemann?
Yes.
Regent Walsh?
Yes.
Regent Whitburn?
Yes.
Regent Whitburn? Regent Woodmansee?
Yes.